After years of bullying, my sister invited me to dinner. When I arrived, she made me clean up, calling me a pathetic waitress. My parents have never concealed the fact that my sister, Helen, has always been the best child in the family. The youngest of my parents' children, she was considered their miracle child. Despite having serious health issues, my parents had been trying for years to have another child after me. My parents were effectively told to give up on growing their family after my mother experienced problems following my delivery, which prompted physicians to advise against getting pregnant again. But my mother defied all expectations and got pregnant again 5 years later. For my father, who was thrilled about the possibility of having another child, this news was nothing short of a miracle. This position as a miracle baby had a significant impact on my sister's upbringing and the way my parents regarded her. They have always treated her like a queen, going above and beyond to make sure she has the finest of everything. Her unique position within the family was further cemented by the lavish celebration of each of her accomplishments and milestones. It was obvious to everyone, including me, that my sister had a special and elevated place in our parents' affections, since this partiality was never covert. Rather, it was publicly expressed and accepted. Not to be misunderstood, my parents also made sure I had all I needed. However, their treatment of me frequently seemed like an afterthought. For example, school functions. My parents would always choose to go to my sister's function if we had activities on the same day. As if my wants and occurrences were somehow less significant, they would explain that she was the youngest and so required them more. My parents still treasure the innumerable childhood photos of my sister that are painstakingly arranged in albums. They haven't even saved one of my albums, on the other hand, saying that my photos were lost in a storm. I would have liked to see how I grew up, therefore I wish they could have at least saved a couple photos. When my early life wasn't kept the same way as my sister's, it's difficult to avoid feeling like an afterthought. When I was growing up, my sister Helen's problems, no matter how minor, were promptly addressed and fixed. However, my father would brush me off and label me spoiled if I ever complained or wanted something. My mother would reprimand me for being more confident like my sister and accuse me of being overly theatrical if I ever felt nervous about trying new things or approaching strangers. I always felt that my sister's worries and emotions were more important than mine because of the way my parents treated me. Then came the game of blame. I was also held accountable for my sister's activities if she ever committed a transgression. My parents say that since I was the eldest, I ought to have taught her to be better. Because of my birth order, I was always held accountable, even if I had nothing to do with her behavior. This unwarranted ongoing blaming made me even more of the underdog and made me live in perpetual shadow of my sister. Helen didn't help either. She was well aware of how to take advantage of her status as the favorite child, and frequently used it to outdo me or get away with things. She would often coerce me into letting her use my possessions or put on my clothes without my consent during even the most minor arguments. She would go to our parents and complain if I ever ventured to object, accusing me of being conceited and self-centered. I would unavoidably receive criticism for not sharing and be made to feel guilty in every circumstance. But Helen's actions were distinctly biased. She was always very protective of her belongings and never let me touch them. We shared a room for a long time, and she aggressively protected her side and possessions. The dynamic remained the same even after we went into different rooms. She was quite particular about her belongings, but she always wanted me to be understanding and giving with mine. It was discouraging and frustrating to experience this double standard. I always felt alone and underappreciated because of Helen's ability to control circumstances to her advantage and my parents' steadfast support of her. They believed Helen could do no wrong, while I was always in the wrong, regardless of what I did. I had severe depression as a result of my parents' and sister's behavior. As a teenager, I experienced severe problems with my self-image and my confidence began to decline. Particularly when Helen would argue with me or make fun of me, the tension was unbearable. I was constantly on edge due to my fear of confrontation, and I frequently felt like I was about to have a panic attack because of my parents' combative yelling. I would feel as though I was choking beneath the weight of their disappointment and rage when they approached too close during their outbursts. My family didn't seem to be aware of or concerned about my difficulties. With no one to turn to for help, I felt like an animal in a cage, caught in a vicious cycle of mental and emotional suffering. Writing down my thoughts in a journal was therefore the only thing that gave me comfort. I would write my heart out on those pages every night, sharing my sorrows, disappointments, and anxieties. It was the only setting where I felt free to be totally open about my situation. It gave me some serenity and allowed me to process the pandemonium around me. Because I was worried that Helen may discover the journal and make fun of my weaknesses, I always kept it hidden beneath my bed. My worst nightmare came true one day. While I was out, Helen, who had a tendency of prying into my room even though I had repeatedly asked her to leave, discovered my journal. My one haven must have been violated when she read through its contents. My parents and Helen were seated in the living room with particularly serious expressions when I got home that evening. Given their solemn looks, I assumed there might have been a death in the family and inquired about their well-being. In order to speak with me, my dad asked me to sit down. As I obeyed, my heart began to race and I had a bad sensation in my stomach. Then, from behind her, my mother took my journal. When I demanded to know what she was doing with my journal, my eyes dilated in amazement and disbelief. While my mother gave me an unusually serious look and inquired as to whether what I had written actually expressed my innermost sentiments, Helen simply grinned, taking pleasure in my pain. I felt completely exposed and deceived at that very moment. My notebook had been my lone haven, where I could vent my suffering and annoyance without worrying about criticism or mockery. My deepest innermost thoughts were now exposed to the very people who inspired me to compose them. I was overcome by the seriousness of the situation, and while I fought to react, I could feel a panic attack coming. Yes, it did reflect my thoughts, I said gently, adding that they had no right to read it. My father shook his head and informed me that they were really worried about me if what I had written was accurate. He went on to add that after reading my journal, they felt that I was a psychopath, who needed assistance because of the hatred they thought I had for them, and I gazed at them in confusion. I was shocked beyond belief. I had never said anything harsh about my sister or my parents in my whole journal. All I had done was write down the feelings and experiences their acts had given me over the years. But here they were, turning my sincere thoughts into something evil. For keeping a notebook, my parents began accusing me of writing such dark things, and even calling me a psychopath. My mother continued by accusing me of making things up to fill the book and saying that neither she nor my father had ever treated me in this manner. I needed serious help, she insisted, before I harmed someone. Helen went so far as to comment that she was ashamed to call me her sister after reading my notebook since my actions were clearly not normal. Retorting that I had done nothing wrong and that I had not written anything negative about them, I attempted to defend myself. I clarified that they had no authority to condemn me based on my personal reflections because the notebook was only about my life. My family, however, was obsessed with their story that something was wrong with me and didn't care about my explanations. In front of them, I felt so vulnerable and exposed. They seemed to have taken away the last remnant of my privacy and turned it against me. The very following day, my parents informed me that I needed serious help before things turned south, and that they would be taking me to see a psychiatrist. It was obvious that they perceived me as the issue because of the disdain and misdirected worry in their statements. I experienced a crippling sense of powerlessness and betrayal. Instead of admitting the pain and harm they had caused, it seemed as though they were intent on making me the issue and changing the course of events. I was deeply hurt by the betrayal, and their reaction made me feel even more alone and powerless than I had already felt. I felt quite uneasy and guilty at first when I started seeing a psychiatrist, as though I had actually done something wrong. I was ashamed to express my thoughts as I had accepted the notion that I was the problem in my family. My psychiatrist recognized my hesitancy and attempted to close the distance by using my notebook. I felt more at ease and was able to open up when she read entries from it and asked me questions based on what I had written. Since it had always been easier for me to express myself on paper than in person, the journal was a useful tool throughout our meetings. But as I was getting married to the love of my life, everything changed. My parents contacted me after learning about my impending nuptials via cousins and other family members. They were obviously shocked to be left out of such a significant event in my life. They made an unexpected call. They reluctantly expressed sorry for their previous actions and acknowledged their wrongdoings. Since I was going to have a family of my own, they acknowledged that even though they couldn't alter the past, they still wanted to make new memories with me. They pleaded with me to pardon them and let them share in this new phase of my life. Their apologies was a surprising turn of events that had me face a variety of feelings. I chose to forgive them and invite my parents to my wedding since I was starting a new chapter in my life. In addition, they asked my sister to come, but I flatly refused, and they didn't pursue the matter. In retrospect, I'm glad I invited my parents, who had a great time at the wedding. The decision seemed natural since they were truly thrilled for my husband and myself. Since then I've tried to occasionally go over to my parents' house for supper in order to catch up. I occasionally have to talk to my sister on these visits. She still attempts to enrage me by making insensitive remarks about my marriage or my family, but I always make sure to confront her conduct head-on and correct her. Helen has only grown more resentful of me over the years, particularly after learning that I get along better with my in-laws than she does with her husband's family. Her in-laws have never truly embraced her into their family and apparently still hate her. She tries to put them down by making subtle remarks about my spouse or my in-laws. She expresses her annoyance and discontent with her personal situation through these comments. Helen keeps making these harsh remarks despite my dad's repeated observations of her behavior and his request for her to cease. I was told I was pregnant 4 months ago. My spouse and I are ecstatic about the news. He makes twice as much as I do, so we agreed that I should take a temporary leave of absence to concentrate on the pregnancy. My spouse and my in-laws, who have been quite sympathetic and supportive along this process, fully back this decision. My sister was incensed when she learned that I had chosen to quit my career in order to stay at home with my unborn child. Because they needed both of their earnings to make ends meet, her husband never permitted her to be a stay-at-home mother, which was the source of her rage. Helen never had the opportunity to unwind or take a break during her pregnancy, unlike me. As a result, whenever we get together, she criticizes my choice to express her displeasure. She has referred to me as foolish, and suggested that being a stay-at-home mom is humiliating. On multiple occasions, I have just laughed off her comments and told her that I had years of experience and could go back to work whenever I chose. Helen, however, has attempted to manipulate the issue by claiming that I should never have given up on my profession and that my husband is being domineering. This strikes me as ironic because I chose to leave my job. I am aware that her attempts to discredit my choice are obviously motivated more by her personal discontent with her life than by any genuine criticism of my decisions. I have made every effort to avoid her in order to preserve my mental health and give my whole attention to enjoying my pregnancy. My sister contacted me a week ago to invite me to a dinner party she was throwing. She wanted my spouse and I to go, and she intended to invite her in-laws and our whole family. I viewed this dinner gathering as a welcome diversion and an opportunity to mingle, as I hadn't gone out much since my pregnancy. I was more motivated to go since I reasoned that my sister would probably pay less attention to me with so many people around. Although I consented to go, things didn't work out that night. My spouse had to work late into the night to finish some last-minute chores. He was already under a lot of stress and he kept apologizing to me for being late to work. I didn't hold it against him because I knew that these things may happen. We were already running late for the dinner party when he finally arrived to pick me up. I thought it was better to be late than not at all, so I chose not to cancel despite the delay. As soon as we got to my sister's house, I saw that most of the people there had already eaten dinner and were chatting casually. My dad doesn't feel comfortable driving at night, so even my parents went after supper. My sister chastised us for being late right away, and although I didn't blame her for being irritated, I took the initiative to apologize on my husband's behalf because he was obviously humiliated by the circumstance. I was relieved when Helen ushered my husband to a chair and brought him a plate of food, but she drew me aside and led me into the kitchen. There she disclosed that there was no food left for me because everyone had already consumed their second or even third helping. This realization surprised me, especially since I was already really hungry and felt even more so because I was pregnant. I was disappointed, but I decided not to dispute or voice my displeasure. I told her that I could just order something online because I knew that our tardiness had caused this trouble. I could still eat in this manner without creating any more trouble. It was nice of her to nod and offer to order me something. However, she informed me that the least I could do tonight was wash the dishes because I had arrived so late and hadn't contributed much during the evening. I was surprised when she asked. I sneered and informed her that I hadn't anticipated being asked to work for her just because I was late for the dinner party invitation. Because I was late, I thought it was ridiculous to expect me to clear her visitors' plates. She reacted quickly and angrily. As her sister, I should be helping her, especially since she's been cooking so much all day, she shot out in a low, angry tone. She said that as my mother had assisted her in serving the guests at dinner, I should do the same because I was related. Helen made it clear that she wanted my assistance because her husband was never helpful in the kitchen. I countered that Helen shouldn't have invited so many people if she was feeling overburdened. She responded angrily and contemptuously, telling me that the least I could do was to keep quiet and provide her a hand because I would never be able to comprehend her predicament. In a scathing comment, she went on to say that it wasn't a huge problem if I assisted her as well because, now that I was pregnant, I was just a pathetic waitress for my husband at home. Her scathing remarks caught me off guard and were really painful. The weight of her remarks caused tears to build up in my eyes, adding to my already present feelings of hunger and emotional vulnerability. I hurried into one of Helen's bedrooms and closed the door behind me because I didn't want her to see me in distress. I had to locate a place where I could gather myself. Once inside, the usual feeling of being unable to breathe was overwhelming, and I could feel my old panic attack beginning to re-emerge. I fervently prayed that no one, including my spouse, would notice my misery and pursue me. I needed this alone time to get some peace and regain emotional control. After calming down and giving it some thought, I believed that Helen deserved to be disciplined once and for all because of her constant remarks and the way she continued to treat me. I made the decision to act against her. Finding all the pictures I had taken of my old journals was the first thing I did. I took my journal with me when I left my parents' house, and throughout the years, I began to save pictures of the journal entries in my email so I would always have a copy. I was able to locate pictures of my old journal entries, which described all the humiliations and complaints I had suffered at the hands of my sister years ago, thanks to this. Since my sister was only terrified of my brother-in-law, I decided to send him all the pictures before my husband and I departed that evening. I was aware that my parents would just chastise her for her behavior toward me, but she would never, ever change. I wanted Helen to go through a small portion of the humiliation that her husband rightfully inflicted upon her. I sent him a thorough letter outlining how Helen had been a major bully in my life. Helen had asked me to the dinner party, but I had to clean up after her and the other guests, I wrote in the message. I explained that she seemed to be jealous of my more thoughtful husband, which is why she was upset with me. In the hopes that he might better understand or take action, I tried to give him a clear picture of Helen's behavior and how it had affected me. Bill and Helen got into a heated argument as a result, as you may guess. Bill told our parents that he now saw Helen differently since he couldn't believe she had been harassing me for years. My dad has chosen to be a little more neutral, but my mother fully blames me for their argument since she feels that I went too far by exposing my sister. I have no regrets about letting my sister see her spouse. Update 1. For those who are curious, after learning what my sister said to me at the party, my husband is just as furious with her. He didn't know, but when I told him everything, he called my sister to vent his annoyance and correct her. I've never witnessed him so agitated, and Helen must have been really unsettled by his response. Additionally, he has made it very apparent to her that she should stop talking about our family going forward, especially since she is unaware of the whole truth. Update 2. My brother-in-law is furious with Helen since his own family has always thought she is egotistical and careless. Throughout their entire marriage, Helen had a tendency to place the blame for any argument or quarrel on everyone but herself. Because he loves her, Bill has been lenient toward her for a long time. But it was really eye-opening for him when I showed him my journal entries. He had never known our complex past, but he had always sensed that Helen and I were not particularly close. He had only witnessed a superficial aspect of our relationship and was ignorant of the seriousness of the problems that had existed between us because Helen had conveniently never told him the truth. His perception of my sister was drastically changed after hearing my side of the tale, which at last filled in a lot of the blanks. It demonstrated even more how accurate his family's assessment of Helen was. Bill told me all of this when he contacted me this week. He also wanted to hear it all straight from my point of view. We had a lengthy phone discussion, and I was more than happy to talk. I described all the hardships I'd gone through as a child, highlighting the way my parents had always given preference to my sister. Before I nearly cut them off after leaving for college, I told my parents how my psychiatrist had attempted to address these problems with them, but they had never admitted their mistakes. My brother-in-law also talked candidly about his own interactions with Helen throughout our talk. He described how she would occasionally treat him similarly, but he had always dismissed it as just her being herself. Even though he was aware of his own shortcomings in their relationship, he was shocked to learn about the ways she had harassed me over the years, even as an adult. It has truly caused him to reconsider their relationship as a whole. Helen may be acting harshly toward their child behind his back, which worries him as well. Update 3. For the final time, I'm answering some of your questions. After the party, my sister wrote me a number of angry texts and, of course, blamed me for everything. My husband had to step in and stop her. She hasn't contacted me or spoken to me since. Second, my mom has insisted that I inform Bill that I over-exaggerated the events from my early years and apologize. I adamantly declined, stating that my husband and I would cut her off if she persisted in endorsing my sister's position. But my father knows why I did what I did. Finally, I'm not sure what Bill will decide about his connection with Helen. My ultimate objective was to expose my sister and show her that she couldn't continue to get away with disparaging me. I have absolutely no regrets about what I did. Bill is now entirely responsible for determining what is best for his future. I was dumped by my ex-fiancée just before our wedding. 15 years later, she has returned, filled with scars and regrets, asking for another chance. She simply went without saying anything or leaving a note soon before our big wedding, and I never received an explanation. Her relatives couldn't understand either. She disappeared without a trace, leaving me and everyone else in the dark. Despite the fact that we had spent high school and college together, she didn't come back to me. Her parents had to inform me that she didn't want me around and had no plans to return. I never understood why she did it, but I was forced to honor her demands. Since she stopped communicating with everyone, I could only assume that she suffered a mental breakdown. I've battled the unsolved questions ever since, even though we were both young and still figuring life out. Then she suddenly wants to meet up and DMs me on Facebook. Anger, anxiety, optimism and despair are all over me after all these years. I'm still attracted to her. Her Facebook profile makes me miss her, but I'm not sure if I could bring her back. She is unmarried and even more gorgeous than before. I'm torn. She says it's preferable to talk about it face to face, but she won't elaborate on why she left. All I can infer from her Facebook posts is a great deal of regret, talks about loneliness, feeling weak and leading a shameful existence. It's annoying. I should not have anything to do with her after she abandoned me, but the truth is that I couldn't stop thinking about her. What ought I to do? Should I confront her, ghost her back, or see where we might go with this meeting? TLDR, after more than 15 years, my ex-fiancée DMs me on Facebook and asks to go on a date. She abandoned me prior to our wedding, so I haven't spoken to her since. Important remarks. Wow, OP, that's difficult. It's been 16 years. Would you find closure you never got, or would seeing her set you back after all this time? OP, I'm not sure. All I want is closure. I believed she had cheated on me for a long time, but based on what her family and some friends told me, it appeared to be more of a mental breakdown. She was anxious about finals and her profession, and she was afraid about the wedding. She eventually made a comeback after ghosting everyone, but I was never involved. I've been thinking about her constantly. You should try to get closure by meeting her, but don't go in expecting her to return. You may not feel the same way about her today, but you do feel something for the person you knew. It's a long time to be abandoned like that. 16 years. Her motivations for contacting me after all this time seem dubious to me. Avoid thinking about her too much. OP, what would be her motivation? She wasn't pregnant when she abandoned me, and I don't have any money or children. The disappearance was completely unexpected. She simply disappeared and never returned to school. To be honest, I think something went wrong. Revision. That was something then. At least I had closure. We sat and chatted outside the cafe where we met. Her severely scarred arms and the intense pain imprinted on her face caught my attention right away. In summary, she acknowledged that she had intended to end the relationship long before the wedding but had been too cowardly and weak to advocate for herself. Everything caused her to have a total nervous breakdown. She felt unable to defend herself and was fed up with being forced to do things she didn't want to do. She was upset with her family for forcing her into a degree she didn't desire and for pressuring her to get married and start a family. She also felt angry at herself for lacking the guts to speak up. We both agreed that nothing she did was justified. I put her on the spot when I proposed to her for the first time in public. She wanted to refuse, but she couldn't risk hurting me. She was correct, I made all of her decisions. Back then, I was a very different person. I was self-centered, and she was submissive, just following the crowd without advocating for herself. I frequently muffled her speech, preventing her from developing or becoming her own person. Everything culminated at one point and she suffered a total mental collapse. The only person she ever trusted, her best friend, advised her to flee her issues. She claimed that the only thing she knew how to do was to flee. Her life took a turn for the worse. She didn't say what she had done, but she ended up in prison for a while after being homeless for a few years after being evicted by her best friend's husband. Since her release almost a year ago, she has been making efforts to improve her life. She ultimately got in touch with me, got a job, and reconnected with her parents. We both agreed that there isn't a future for us. We now live far apart and are two different persons who have nothing in common. She doesn't demand forgiveness or justify her actions. She is disgusted and ashamed of what she did. I just forgiven her because I wanted to be furious but couldn't. After saying our goodbyes and shaking hands, it's likely that we won't see each other again. It's heartbreaking. At last, she and I were able to get the closure we sought. A weight seems to have been lifted. I now realize that we will never have a future together. However, I'm also upset because it's really over. It was all for nothing, all these years of hope. Not many people can say that, but in the end this is an ending, and I've finally found closure. Should I trust her story? I do indeed. And is it really important now, even if she is full of it? She has always struck me as being very meek and weak-willed. When things get too tough, she usually just follows everyone's instructions and flees. Because she is too frail to deal with her issues, she avoids them. Her family was the usual tiger parents who deny their troubled child, so I guess it makes sense that they wouldn't tell me anything about her. TLDR, if it ends well, everything is okay. Finally, our relationship is over, and we can both move on. Important remarks. However, her companion ought to have been the one to notice it. Her companion acted as a facilitator. All of us were. The person who urged her to run was her friend. Anything was all up to her, of course. No one made her do anything. However, I might have anticipated it if I hadn't disregarded her issues and had instead been more involved in her life. But it is what it is. Wait a second, OP, where did you find an open cafe? Asterisk. It's partially open. We sat in the parking lot and ordered takeout. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. The proposal shouldn't come as a surprise. You should be fully informed before proceeding. At some point, talk about it as something you both desire. If the other person isn't prepared, dropping it at random puts a lot of pressure on them. In actuality, she was correct. In order to ensure that she wouldn't say no, I purposefully proposed in public. All I could think of was myself. I never thought she was unhappy or that a public proposal may make her uncomfortable. You had a good ending, but she didn't. You seem to have contributed to her issues at the time. Have you shown regret for how you handled her? Did you make amends or provide assistance? To be honest, I felt horrible. Because I just wasn't there for her, I contributed to her anxiety and sorrow. I was prone to taking her for granted. She didn't want to hurt me, so she wanted to end the relationship. She believed that being married to me wouldn't be all that horrible. However, she simply broke. The idea of being in a lie-based, loveless marriage became too much. With a snap, she fled. I did love her, but to be honest, I wouldn't have been so oblivious to her needs if I really loved her. I could have liked the idea of her more than I actually loved her. This is forcing me to examine myself closely. I get uninvited from my brother's wedding, then get harassed by his family for not caring enough. Original post. This whole thing is so weird. I, 27 am gay. I came out at 16 and my parents told me they would always love me, but to not mention it to my older brother who I'll call Brick, then 19 30 now. When I was confused and asked why, they said that Brick had expressed some awful opinions about gay people. I limited talking to Brick until I moved out at 18, which wasn't much of a problem because we were never close. I went to uni, got a good job, and an awesome boyfriend, 28 in my home city. Me and my boyfriend Angel live a peaceful life. Peaceful until a few days ago when I got a call from my brother. I was concerned that Brick was calling me, as we have never messaged before, just had each other's numbers for emergency purposes. I picked up because maybe there was some emergency happening. He opened the call with an annoyed, "Hey man," and I knew something was up. He said he was getting married to his fiancée Yen, 24 next year. I didn't even know he had a girlfriend. I was like, "That's great, Brick," and asked some boring wedding things that he begrudgingly answered. He then told me invites were being sent out in a couple weeks, and that I could bring a +1. Here's where I made the mistake that started this mess. Without thinking like an idiot, I said, "Cool, I'll bring my boyfriend." Major mess up. Brick immediately started yelling insults down the line, screaming that he wouldn't have an FF slur at his wedding. I didn't say anything and just hung up. I was rattled by hearing those words from my own brother's mouth, even though I knew his feelings about people like me. I told Angel, and he comforted me, ordering in my favorite restaurant and watching movies with me, which was awesome. We went to bed later and I felt alright the next day. I sent my parents a message that Brick invited me and uninvited me from his wedding pretty much in the same breath, and went on my way to work, not a clue of the crapstorm waiting for me when I got off. When I turned my phone on again after my shift, it was blowing up. Messages and calls from my parents and relatives galore asking me what the F happened. I phoned my parents back when I got home and gave them the rundown of what happened and said I honestly didn't care because it's not like Brick would be coming to my wedding anyways. My parents immediately chastised me for my obvious disinterest and disregard of my brother's life, and told me I should be apologizing to him for bringing my personal life into his wedding. What? I basically told my parents to screw off and have been getting bombarded with messages from relatives to apologize to my brother and get my invite reinstated, and apologize to my parents for disrespecting them, but I really don't want to. Angel's reassuring me that I did nothing wrong, but it's still nagging me. AAETA, relevant comment. OK_number_4988. Why did your brother sound annoyed at the beginning of the call? Did he already know? Or was he being forced to invite you by your parents? Seems weird. OOP, he's never been my biggest fan, honestly. We were very different as kids, like polar opposites, and he didn't like that. Very on brand for him. He definitely didn't know I was gay before the call. My parents have kept it very under wraps for years. In terms of if he was being forced to invite me by my parents, I really have zero clue. Update post. My OG post got locked was removed per some misunderstanding/confusion with the AITA mods while trying to post this update, but I'll just post it on my page here without an r/ if anyone wants to see it. Y'all have really opened my eyes on a lot of issues in my family. I apologize for only replying to a few comments. There's just so many of you. Big shout out to all the people who gave compliments to Angel. I showed him this post last night and he thanks you all. I've been showing him lots of love because he really is an angel. And to the people calling this fake, AI, cliche and whatnot. I hate to break it to you all, but this is just my life. It sounds cliche because this is the sort of all too real thing that happens to many people in the community. Just move along if you want to say that stuff, because you're honestly just wasting your time. One of two things I would also like to address is people questioning me about thinking I could possibly be the AH in this situation, and all I can say is that when you have a mass of people telling you you're wrong for what you did, it's hard to not maybe believe them just a little bit, no matter how absurd it is. Second thing, for people wondering how no one in the family knew I was gay, I really was never am not close with my extended family, as they all live in different provinces, and my immediate family never traveled. We really just send each other holiday and birthday messages and have brief conversations whenever those are sent, and I just never had the urge to come out to them. Anyways, on to the update. I decided I didn't want to let this sit for any longer. I took a day off work, and I added my parents, Brick, and all the family that messaged and called me into one big group chat, per one advice I saw here. I laid out everything that went down to them, in case they were told a different story by my parents and brother. I told them that I was going NC with my parents and Brick no matter what, and if they didn't apologize and realize what they did wrong, or I cut them off too. I turned my phone off and continued on without it for the rest of the day. Once I turned my phone on again, I had lots of messages from them. My parents were outraged, and Brick said nothing. Some of my extended family apologized and told me that my parents just told them I was mean to Brick about some of his wedding plan choices, which got me uninvited. Still trying to wrap my head around how stupid that is. Seriously think my parents might be Neanderthals. Anyways, the real story made others even more angry and more insistent that I apologize, and they were promptly blocked. I didn't answer any of my parents' texts, calls and blocked them. I feel like I have a weight off my shoulders. I'm not concerned about my parents showing up at our apartment, as they moved away from my city last year. Me and Angel are planning a lovely trip, per advice of a lot of people that we thought was great, to France to visit his family during when the wedding will be taking place, which I'm very excited for. I've heard nothing but good things about them. This will most likely be my only update on this post, and I thank you all for your support. At my best friend's wedding, the groom admitted he wasn't sure if he wanted to marry her. What should I do? Original post. Alright, was just a MOH in a wedding that ended in an absolute shit show, and I have to tell someone about it because I don't even know what to do or if I should do anything about this. I'm at a total loss. This was a first for me. My childhood friend was getting married today to her high school sweetheart. The wedding was a long time coming. They've been together for 6.5 years and share a 2-year-old son together. They've been engaged for 3 years now, because they delayed planning the wedding after she unexpectedly got pregnant with their son. So now the wedding was finally here. Earlier this year she set a date and started planning. I was engaged this year and got married in July and originally was just supposed to be a regular bridesmaid. The bride's sister was supposed to be the MOH, but they had a falling out. Basically, the bride would always call her sister ranting about her fiancé every time they would fight, which caused the sister to form a pretty negative opinion of him. Sister lives across several states away and doesn't see everything that goes on here. Her mind jumped right to abuse and she told the bride if she marries him, she's not coming to the wedding. Now here's the thing. Their relationship isn't perfect. They are young. They went through a lot very quickly and very young. Getting engaged, unexpected pregnancy, moving in together, all happened very fast. They fought a lot. I had my concerns at first. But after spending a lot more time with them I saw how much they genuinely loved each other, parented their son together well, and we're working towards a future together. The bride and I have been close friends for so much of our lives, she is like family to me. I care for her deeply. When she asked me to step in as MOH, I said yes for those reasons. Cut to today, the wedding day. Everything was going well. Groom was getting emotional when they did their private vows, and before walking down the aisle he was still wiping tears. It warmed my heart. Looking back now, I wonder what the heck was going through his head. Not sure they were tears of joy. As the night went on the bride mingled and danced with her family. She had so much family that traveled from many states away to be here, and she wanted to be a good hostess to them. The groom was usually off talking with his own family when she was doing this, but for the most part they stayed together. They sat together, ate together, danced to a few songs, played the shoe game, then they were mingling separately with their families. Didn't think that was a big deal, as this is often how receptions go, with so many people there pulling you in opposite directions. At one point they both went inside the venue, reception was outside, for a while, and then she came out alone. She continued to chat with family, and then after a little bit realized he was nowhere to be found. After a while of searching, we found him wandering around outside, going for a walk. Bride was pretty distraught at this point. I will add that the groom did have a good amount to drink during the party. Apparently when they went inside the venue, he was angry at her for not spending enough time with him during the party and said they were hardly together the whole night. Once he got back from his little walk, they were just arguing inside their room, I guess. At this point a lot of guests were leaving, and the ones left, me, my husband, the rest of the wedding party, and their immediate families, didn't really know what to do. We were supposed to do a big send-off for them, so we were just kind of waiting for that. We packed up all the stuff, broke down all the tables and chairs, loaded it in cars, and just waited. Me and the other bridesmaids pulled her aside to talk to her, but she was pretty deflated at this point. Apparently the groom had taken his ring off and told her he wasn't sure he wanted to be married to her. At their wedding. Mind you, they've been living together for 3 years. They share a child. They've been dating since 2018. Nothing about this was rushed other than maybe their ages. They are quite young, but I never thought of them as immature until this stunt he pulled at their wedding. Over not spending enough time together at the reception. Like, sorry, why not just not leave her side then? I just don't understand at all. We finally decided to just load their stuff in their car and tell them it's all loaded and they should probably go ahead and go to get some sleep before their flight tomorrow. At the car we hugged goodbye and I left to come home. This girl is one of my absolute best friends. I hate that her beautiful wedding was ruined by her husband being petty and stubborn. She was in tears and distraught on her own wedding day. It's just awful. I don't really know where to go from here, if this is at all normal and something they will get past, or if this is more serious. I genuinely am rooting for them, but this whole situation just has me sitting in my car feeling confused and worried for my friend. They're leaving for their honeymoon tomorrow. Don't feel like it's an appropriate time to reach out and try to talk to her about all of this. Any advice is appreciated, I guess. I'm thinking I check in via text a few times while they're traveling, on the honeymoon, and make sure it's going okay, and make plans to see her when she gets back and we can debrief everything then if she wants to get into it. Starting to think the sister might have been onto something. Relevant comments. Night woman cometh, ooh. Lots of problems here, the SIS was onto something. If the bride is constantly calling her with complaints, fights, the groom is not a good fit for her. 2. The groom was drunk. This took his feelings from a 3, hey, can we spend the rest of the reception together? To a 10, you are dead to me because you are ditching me at our wedding night for totally reasonable reasons. 3. Sounds like this wedding spat was just a representation of chronic issues between them. If this relationship is going to last, they need to see a therapist. This is beyond your aid, unfortunately. Personally, I wouldn't text or say anything today or tomorrow. She is probably distraught. They need to work out some things on their honeymoon. Maybe check in with her when she's back, or she'll reach out to you if she needs advice. That's what I would want anyways, but you know her best, Warren Finn, literally this. I think when you said the sister doesn't see everything that goes on, I do, you're off. By a lot. You're seeing the smoke show. The sister is hearing about the reality. OOPC. I'll add a little context here though. I grew up with the bride, and besides her sister I'm probably the only friend she has that is her friend. I did not know her husband before they got together and still didn't know him super well before she got pregnant. Her other friends are all extensions of him somehow. His siblings and in-laws, his friends' girlfriends. I feel like a lot of the issue is that she needs more people to actually talk to. Her sister will always take her side. His family will always take his side and shrug things off as that's just how he is. I have just tried my best to be somewhat of a Switzerland presence for her. She knows I support her, but in that, I also support her relationship, and I know marriage is hard, especially with kids. So I try to support them both. Legitimate_cat 3435. I have so many questions. Just trying to understand the dynamics of this group. 1. In what scenario did she not grow up in the same house as her sister? 2. What were his parents doing at the reception, and were they aware of his hissy fit? 3. Is it safe to assume that his parents were still there at the end? 4. What were her parents doing at the end? 5. Who had their child? OOP half-sisters through adoption by the dad too. His parents sat at their own table and didn't seem to care about mingling with her family, but I don't want to jump to conclusions as to why. 3. His parents were still there at the end and his dad looked really disappointed when helping us load their car. I pulled his mom aside and asked her to go talk to her son because she may be the only one he listens to right now. She did talk to him and was the one who ended up getting him to come out of his room. IDK what was said. 4. Her parents were helping clean up and I don't think they knew the full extent of what was going on. They were still talking to guests. It wasn't until the next day when I talked to both of them that I realized they were not aware of what the groom said about being unsure about the marriage, taking his ring off, etc. They thought they had a little spat that got resolved quickly before they left. 5. Groom's mom had the baby most of the time and towards the end of the night he fell asleep in the groom's sister's arms. He went home with the bride's parents that night because they're watching him while they go on honeymoon. Update. It's been a week now and a lot of people asked for an update. Some people on my original post were very adamant this relationship was abusive, citing red flags, research evidence, and personal anecdotes that this story reminded you of. There were also several comments saying I was overreacting, the groom was just drunk, and they will probably be fine. I wanted to clarify some things from my original post. While my friend, the bride, does have her sister, she was the only child growing up in her house. In many ways she truly is an only child. She is at least the only child of her mother. She already had a small circle, her family lives all over the country and is not involved very much in her life. That was not the groom's doing. He did not isolate her. Secondly, I would like to clarify their ages, because I didn't mention them in my last post. They started dating at 15, and 16 and got married at 21 and 22. Part of the reason I omitted it originally is because I didn't want people jumping to conclusions about their relationship because of their ages. There is a lot of stigma around getting married young, especially on Reddit. And I get it, the odds are stacked against you. That's why I decided to put their ages in now, because I realize it's important to understand they really do have so much growing and learning to do still. Now on to the update, it's pretty short. She Snapchatted me later that night after they got to their hotel and said as he began to sober up, he was realizing all that he ruined and was very apologetic. He realized they didn't get to do their last dance, their send-off, the bouquet and garter toss. She said he was crying. They talked it all out and she said it sucks that their wedding ended that way, but it was amazing up to that point, and the important thing is that they're married and going to spend the rest of their lives together. She said they're going to work past it and I asked how. Do you have a plan? Just want to be sure. She said they will work on their communication skills and I once again recommended therapy. She said they'd talk about it and consider it, then they were off on their honeymoon and seemed to be having a great time. I've checked in a bit when she has Snapchatted me some pics, and they're doing well. She knows she can always come to me, and she knows I'll support her no matter what. Right now I'm gonna do everything I can to help uplift them as a couple and help them form some better communication habits. Her sister didn't support her choice to stay with him, and that's why sister is not in her life anymore. I don't want that. I will support her choice. Period. A few key takeaways. Be careful drinking on your wedding day. You don't need that much. The last thing you want is to get drunk on your wedding day and do something stupid as a result that you can't take back. One commenter put it really well. You may be able to overlook your partner's ugly parts now, but are you willing to let this be your life if they never change? I know there's a lot of people in this subreddit that are getting married, so I hope someone can learn something from this story. Relevant comments. Comment 1. I skimmed OOP's responses, and she literally says the friend likes to use Snapchat because the messages disappear, so the groom won't see them if he goes through her phone. Then she adds a nice little tidbit that he's very controlling. But somehow the takeaway is to be careful about drinking on your wedding day. And the couple is doing well? I'll chalk OOP's utter lack of discernment up to her age as well because I'm going to assume she's also 21. 22. Comment 2, he definitely sounds like an abuser, but I guess OP is one of those people who thinks abuse only counts if it's physical. But he's definitely emotionally abusive at the least. What OP is seeing is an abuse love bomb cycle. OP mistakenly thinks the love bomb stuff proves that he loves her so much, when in fact that's merely a tactic to keep her from leaving him due to the abuse. Comment 3. How is the main takeaway? Don't drink too much at your wedding. People get wasted on their wedding day and don't take their ring off and say they shouldn't be married. I would say that's far more frequent than whatever this is. Comment 4. OOP missed the point so hard I'm almost tempted to call her a troll. Like, how do you write that all out? then not have a fucking epiphany that the relationship was built on rotten foundations. Oh, but I've seen how much they love each other. And love is rarely enough to fix a fundamentally broken relationship. Those two need actual, professional help, and all they're doing is sticking their head in the sand. Uncovering a decade of secrets, suspecting my husband fathered his best friend's kids and now one wants to date our daughter. OOP is married to Luke, who has a girl BFF, Amy, who he claims is like a sister to him. Even after getting married, Luke maintained a very close bond with Amy. OOP has 4 kids. Sophie, 15, Owen, 12, Louise, 10, and Carter, 6. Amy has 4 kids. Tom, 17, Kaylee, 14, and twins, Adam and Jenna, 9, but no one knows who the dad is and has never been in any long-term relationships. All the kids have grown up together and are close. OOP has begun to suspect that Luke has fathered at least one, if not all of Amy's kids. Amy stopped having kids after Luke had a vasectomy. The kids also look like Tom. OOP has turned a blind eye for years, but now Tom wants to date Sophie. OOP is worried they are actually half-siblings and Tom and Amy also don't want it to happen. Update. The 5th of September 2024, OOP doesn't try a sneaky DNA test, but confronts Luke and Amy, who deny anything untoward, and Amy refuses to have her kids' DNA tested. Luke's mother also suspects something. OOP and Luke have a big fight and he spends the night at Amy's. Update 2. The 6th of September 2024. OOP confides in Sophie about what she suspects about Tom's real father and is surprised to find out that the kids already suspect this and the relationship was actually a plan to get things out in the open and force the truth from Luke and Amy. OOP plans to move ahead with a divorce and try to get a DNA test done as well. Update 3. I think my husband fathered his best friend's children, and now one of them is attracted to my daughter. 3 days later. First, a few points to answer from the comments. I don't have any DNA test results back yet. That can take weeks. But now that I know Sophie is in no danger of dating a relative, the pressure is off. I'll get into this momentarily, but it frankly no longer matters if Luke fathered the children. I highly doubt my father-in-law is having an affair with Amy. At worst, he might know, or even just suspect, the truth about Amy and Luke. But it's also possible that he just refuses to believe they would do such a thing. I've been vague about details for privacy, but to put it very simply, Jim and Amy are both pretty white. Kat and Luke are not. Had Jim fathered Amy's babies, they would look different than they do. Nevertheless, I do have an update. While a stream of comments have called me spineless and naive, called me a sister wife, as an ex-Mormon, that hits a particular nerve. And most recently, a stream of comments have said my story is fake. Fair enough, it's the internet. But Luke is not the first scumbag husband to have 2 families. Several other comments have been incredibly kind and supportive, and I really appreciate that. Apologies if I haven't responded to a comment or direct message that you sent. I covered as many as I could, but I was literally getting hundreds, so I definitely missed several of them. First things first. I discussed this in the comments, but our little team has, supposedly, recruited my mother-in-law. I say supposedly, because Sophie and Tom were going to talk to her about getting help with submitting the DNA test, and, at the advice of my lawyer, I am staying out of the process. Officially, I told Sophie not to do it and she said she wouldn't. MIL hasn't contacted me about it either. Though we have been in touch, I'll get into that more in a moment. The bottom line is that I can honestly say I had no knowledge of any DNA test. Loophole City. Another bit of good news. I was digging through the paperwork in preparation for my divorce, wanting to get a head start against Luke, and one thing that came to my attention is that my name is on the paperwork for our home. Luke's name is not. I was the one who bought the house and we always planned to add Luke onto the paperwork at some point, but we never got around to it and eventually the idea was forgotten. It was my lawyer, Paige, who pointed this out to me, and it was like finding a winning lottery ticket on the ground. I don't know where I'd be without Paige. She's a dear friend from college who I reached out to, hat in hand, for help. She's been there for me this past week, not just as legal counsel but as a friend I really needed right now. The thing is, she's not our lawyer, me and Luke. We have our own family attorney who has helped us out of jams in the past. We clashed with our HOA a few years ago, not worth getting into right now. But Paige is a lawyer who specializes in family law and has handled divorces before. Luke remembers her from college and knows she went into law but doesn't know she's a divorce attorney. So I can have her over for coffee like we're catching up, and he has no idea anything is going on. Turns out, he's not the only one who can harbor someone under his spouse's nose under the guise of being a friend. So, on to the update. The last time I looked in Luke's phone was 3 months ago, around the point Sophie and Tom began to go around claiming they wanted to date. I found nothing. While I know how to search for recently deleted photos and didn't see any, my comments taught me how to find recently deleted messages. So when Luke was asleep, I did just that. Swiped his phone and brought it downstairs, checked recently deleted. I am glad I did, but I also wish I had not, because I'm still reeling from the pain. Sure enough, a conversation with Amy had been deleted. Recent text talking about the conflict between her and me, with Amy describing me as a problem, and Luke trying to pacify her. Without defending me at all, to be clear. They both alluded to how they had expected this for a while and just hoped it would never happen, presumably me accusing them of having an affair. While the whole conversation and the fact that it was deleted was sketchy, nothing was actually admitted. So I scrolled a bit higher, to a few days before the fight. Amy's messages got a bit more flirty. Then, I saw it. 5 days before I confronted them, Amy had sent Luke a topless pic. A selfie with no shirt or bra. Guys, I teared up. I knew it was true, I knew it in my bones, but seeing the proof still cut me like a hot knife. Doesn't help that Amy's always had bigger breasts than me. I exited the Messages app and checked Luke's recently deleted photos. Sure enough, the same selfie was there, and others. Amy topless, Amy naked, in various poses to show off. There were pictures of the two of them together, cuddled and pressed close like a couple. In some of these she was naked. In some, they both were. There were videos. Amy sent Luke a video message of herself topless, and I had to actually hear her voice talking to him in a tone that made me sick, about how she was sending him a quick video to help him get through the day. In more than one video she called him her boo, and, hearing her call him that, I almost vomited. Stopped looking at the point, I'd seen enough. For about 5 minutes anyway, then a strange compulsion to keep searching led me to check Luke's laptop. I knew enough of his passcodes to access his iCloud storage and, yeah, basically more of the same. There were letters, long letters between them. I didn't have the heart to read past the first few lines of one of them, but I did read Luke mention our children. There were countless naked topless selfies of Amy. Selfies of them together. Videos where Amy appeared to be masturbating. There were sex tapes. Of the two of them. Tom had previously offered to try and hide a camera in Amy's room, but fuck, he never needed to. Luke was hiding a whole treasure trove under my nose all along. I scrolled, and scrolled, and scrolled. There were so many. Going back years. Not all of it was even sexual. There were some photos of Amy's kids too. One video was of Kaylee and the twins playing together when they were younger, and Luke and Amy's voices from behind the camera. There were even old pictures of Luke and Amy from when they were younger. I'd even say teenagers. I snapped. All these years I had been telling myself I had to be wrong, that it couldn't be true. Well, it was true. I know that no one forced me to look at as much of the evidence as I did, but I'm still hurting very badly from having seen it, and in that moment, I wanted to act, so I did. I called my lawyer, who is a remarkable woman. It was the middle of the night, so I had to call her twice, and she picked up. Though I had woken her, when I asked her to come by and said it was an emergency, she agreed. I also asked her to draw up the paperwork and have it ready. She told me that she'd already had it ready since I first reached out to her. As I waited for her, I went through the necessary channels on Luke's laptop to make sure he wouldn't be able to remotely disconnect our access to his little stash, changing passwords and all that. My lawyer, let's call her Paige, arrived, and I went outside to greet her in the car. Spent a good half hour in the passenger seat just crying, and she was great about that, before I passed her Luke's phone and his laptop, with all the information she needed to use them. She warned me that this could be considered theft. So I asked her to forward and print out copies of everything she could and then bring the items back, because I just couldn't bear to do it myself. She agreed. I went back inside, and then, I packed up Luke's things while the house slept. At one point Owen got up to use the bathroom and asked me what I was doing, but I told him I was just cleaning. Luke stirred once or twice while I was in the bedroom but did not wake. I got all of his things packed into trash bags and I loaded up the car. That's when I woke him up and told him to come outside. He was confused and half asleep, but he did notice things were missing. I ignored his questions and just told him to come with me. So he followed me outside. Once we were by the car, I pulled out the divorce papers and officially handed them to him. That was about when he figured out what I was doing, and he tried to talk me out of it. Tried to be sweet with me, to be tender. He kept insisting that he loved me and that there had never been anything with Amy. Kept trying to persuade me not to tear our family apart. Even 2 weeks ago, I might have wilted under him because the manipulation and gaslighting were truly masterclass, but I can see through it now. I didn't tell him that I knew he was full of shit, I didn't tell him what I had seen, I just told him we were finished. He tried a different approach. He refused to go. Stated firmly that our children were his too and that even if we were separating, I had no right to just decide the kids would stay with me over him. This was where I very coldly presented the paperwork reminding him that the house is in my name, and told him under no circumstances would my kids be staying with Amy. He argued a while longer, but in the end he decided to be the bigger person, and keep the peace. At that moment I didn't care where he went. Before he left, he did ask about his phone and laptop, and I waved him off by saying they were in one of the bags. Bought a little time. I couldn't sleep for the rest of that night. I cried more. Eventually I realized I'd have to wake my children up early and explain to the extent that I could. Naturally, I woke Sophie first. I told her that I had kicked her father out and that I had discovered evidence of an affair on his devices. I did not specify what kind of evidence and she did not ask. I woke up the others and gently told them that their dad had gone to stay somewhere else for a while. That I wasn't sure where, but from now on things were going to be different. Louise was the one to ask if we were getting divorced, and I couldn't lie to her. I told her yes. Owen asked when they could see their father again and I wanted to cry. Sophie was a very big help, urging her siblings to be sympathetic to me right now and worry about Dad later. I knew better than to poison them against their father. Paige warned me against doing that as well, so I only told Sophie that the affair was confirmed since she had already been in the know. However, as the kids were getting ready for school, Owen approached me and asked me point blank if it was about Amy. If Luke was going to be with her instead of me. I couldn't answer, but I suppose that's an answer on its own. Got the kids to school, and my next step was calling to have the locks changed. I knew Luke would be back for his devices before long, but thankfully Paige returned with them before he showed up again. It was a very quick visit. She just told me that all was accomplished, and she had records of everything we would need in court. Sure enough, Luke turned up an hour later demanding to know where his laptop and phone were. I had set them back in our bedroom like they had never moved, and I just told him he had forgotten them. He insisted that I had said they were in one of the bags, so I just shrugged him off and told him I must have been mistaken. After he grabbed them, he tried again to reason with me, but I just showed him the door. I knew the kids would start to come home from school before long and I think he was trying to delay leaving so he could see them. I was not having it. I started shouting again and sent him on his way. I'm still just in absolute pain and despair for what I saw. I don't know if he'll realize that anyone went through his devices and made copies of the evidence, or if he suspects I saw anything, but he obviously didn't say so. After he left, I cried once again. Talked to my mother-in-law that night. Apparently Luke did show up to his parents' house, which was a surprise, as I was so certain he'd stay with Amy. But maybe even he knows how suspicious that would look to the children and doesn't want to rock the boat as much. Maybe he knows I'm more likely to let my children see their grandmother than Amy at this point, and he wants to see them to give his version of events. That is not happening. Kat already shared his version with me, that he relayed to her and Jim. That I'm having some kind of mental breakdown, that he wishes he could help me, but my paranoia is causing me to lash out and turn violent. I was never violent. I shoved him away when he tried to hold me, that is all. And what's so hilarious is that he didn't mention Amy at all to his parents. He didn't even frame it as me falsely believing he was having an affair. Even though that's his story when talking to me, he left Amy out of it when talking to his parents. Kat noticed that. She believes me. Jim doesn't know what to believe anymore. According to Kat, he seemed very, very troubled by what he heard from all sides. As for Amy, she's radio silent. Tom has told Sophie that she's acting like nothing is wrong but is clearly stressed out. That when her children ask, she makes the same sort of claims. That I'm having some kind of emotional nervous breakdown and pushing her away as well as Luke. She doesn't mention anything about my accusing them of an affair, but still puts it all on me. Amy has not reached out to talk to me directly, and I have not tried talking to her since our big argument. I haven't really told my kids anything, just that I'm having disagreements with Luke and Amy, though I was very clear that it is not a question of my mental health. Honestly, I think they all kind of know what's going on. Sophie continues to be my rock, as I try to be for her and the others, and Tom continues to be our spy in the ranks. Right now, my biggest regret is the stress that all of this is causing on the children, which I knew it would, but it still needed to be done. My life has fallen apart. But it was never my life. Comments. Comment 1. Owen asked if it was about Amy. All of your kids must have seen and heard things from them when they thought they weren't being observed. Please get them into counseling soon. You are amazing, stay strong and calm, that will negate all claims of you having a mental breakdown. You've got this. Comment 2. All the people who talked about keeping the kids together were off their rockers. Her 12-year-old knew there was something wrong and they have been constantly thrown into a situation that was uncomfortable for them. OP has to start putting her kids first. Comment 3. If this is fiction, nicely done. If this is real, you got this. Comment 4. This is how I feel. There's so much effort put into the story even if it was made up by her or AI, I'm all in. Comment 5. Oh, OP. I think I was secretly holding out hope that this would all turn out okay. But, life is not a fairy tale. It was a very brave thing you did, going through his devices and facing this truth. Kind of like breaking your own heart, you knew what you would find. I'm so proud of you. I can't imagine the strength it took to quietly pack his things while he slept peacefully in bed. Sounds like Luke is a master manipulator. The most recent convo with Amy even talked about knowing this would happen. He had a cover story to explain being kicked out locked and loaded. Curious to see how he can spin this into your fault once the truth comes out. I would inquire with your attorney about putting in a stipulation in your divorce decree that Amy not be allowed around your children or under the same roof during his custody times. Amy is a vile, disgusting woman and that's a hill I would be willing to die on. You can't do anything about Luke being around your children, but you can put any kind of stipulation like this built into your divorce decree. Seems you have done everything you could at this point. No matter how difficult it has been, you face the truth and now you will be able to live the rest of your life without a nagging thought at the back of your mind constantly. Don't stop updating. OOP, life is not a fairy tale indeed. You're right, the nagging worry is at least gone. In a way, I think not finding anything would have been worse, because it would have perpetuated the ambiguity. After talking to Tom I was all but certain but it was still possible to be a misunderstanding. That it wasn't true. Now I know for sure. And I hate knowing, but at least the question isn't hanging over me anymore. It's tricky, because them not being allowed to see Amy is going to impact their ability to see their best friends, half-siblings. If being my husband's affair partner was all it took for me to demand she not be allowed to see the kids. I feel like a lot of divorces would have clauses like that but I never hear about it. I don't want Amy seeing my kids but I'm not sure how realistic that is. Comment 6. I honestly don't understand why Luke and Amy went through all this trouble. No one was stopping them from being together at the beginning. Why do all this? They're literally psychotic. They're gonna start painting you as a crazy person to your circle, social media soon. Do you think you can get ahead of the curve and tell people the truth, social media? Without including the photos, videos but screenshots maybe? Of course only if your lawyer approves. Or at least once the divorce proceedings have started and Luke and Amy knows just how much evidence you have. If not, they're gonna spin the story as you went crazy and divorced Luke and they looked to each other for support and fell in love. I know you think no one will believe that story but it's important your narrative gets out. New update. 3 days later. In my last post, there were a number of criticisms toward Paige. You guys will like this update as it turns out, you weren't the only ones who had a problem with her. As far as the deed being in my name, it's not an absolute hook, line and sinker, but Paige is convinced that between that and my having been the one paying the mortgage, I stand a very good chance. It could be interpreted as a common marital property, but I'm going for primary custody with supervised visits anyway. I'm playing hardball. People also questioned whether I should still be posting these, but so long as it's all anonymous, I am in the clear. Doesn't even matter if someone who knows me could figure out I posted this. I didn't use any real names, or reveal my location, or anything like that. As for the laptop, even Paige admitted that was questionable, but technically I gave permission and she was only doing what I could have easily done on my own. I just really didn't want to go through all of that content. As far as the divorce papers, Paige had them filled out after the very first time I contacted her. My serving them to Luke was ceremonial. She still contacted him later to officially serve him and request his lawyer's details. But before he could respond, I had already done something a little sneaky. I reached out to our family attorney, the one who has always been on call to represent me and Luke during our marriage. He helped us out of a jam with the HOA a while back. I'll call him Zach. Now, contrary to some of the comments' suggestions, I cannot just go around town consulting with every lawyer in the area, with the explicit purpose of locking my husband out of hiring them. That is bad faith and judges don't look too kindly on it. However, this was Zach. He had been my attorney, and Luke's, for years. I feel like I had just as much right to him as Luke did. And I got there first. So I was able to nail down our family's lawyer. Met with both him and Paige, and boy howdy, do they not like each other. Zach brought up some of the same problems as some of my comments. He argued that Paige's activity was in the gray area and urged me to hire him to represent me in the divorce instead. That caused a bit of conflict as Paige is explicitly a family attorney and this is her specialization. So I'm going to be consulting both of them from here on out. Zach actually thinks it's a good thing that I made these posts as they can't really do much other than prove my sanity when Luke and Amy try to argue otherwise. Overall, I am doing better. I've been talking to a friend in real life, the mom of one of Sophie's friends. I also have therapy scheduled for myself, and I intend to look into family therapy as well. When my kids ask me what's going on, I simply tell them that their father and I are having adult problems and it's nothing they need to worry about. That worked for about a day. Sophie warned me they were planning to confront me as a group, and they did, asking if Dad had cheated on me with Amy. Obviously they've been talking about this, and perhaps they have been for longer than I had anticipated. Perhaps they've been wondering? Again, even though I had absolute proof, I was hesitant to tell them as much, and let me explain why. I naturally wouldn't tell them about the pornographic content I found. I would simply say that I found messages between Luke and Amy revealing their affair, but, with the exception of Sophie, they wouldn't be satisfied with that. I already know Carter, curious little sweetheart that he is, would want to see these messages. So instead, when I was asked directly by my kids if their dad had cheated on me, I simply said I believe he did, yes. With as much sincerity as I could muster. I think they believe me. Tom and Sophie are texting nonstop and from what I can gather, there's doubt among Amy's children as well, that this is about me losing my mind, and not about their mother being too close to my husband. I think it's slowly sinking in for poor Jim that what he didn't want to believe was possible is very much possible, and it's happening. I haven't shown him or Kat any letters or anything. They're hosting Luke, so I haven't had much of any contact with them at all. But I did have one phone call with Kat where we wished each other well. That was nice. In the background, I could hear shouting and though Kat quickly went outside, I did hear what sounded like Jim shouting at Luke. He doesn't usually shout, he's the calmest man I've ever met, so in a way I'm worried about him but also relieved that the wool is being pulled off of his eyes. According to Kat, Luke is still staunchly denying everything. He was pretty upset when he found out that I had poached Zach though. Which gave me a kind of grim satisfaction. The test results came back. Sophie and Tom tested their DNA against each other to see if they truly are blood siblings. Here's a surprise. According to the test, they're not. They don't share any DNA. To everyone who believed Jim had fathered Amy's babies, here is definitive proof that he did not, because the test would have revealed that too. But I never believed it anyway. Sophie has her doubts and wonders if the results weren't faulty and if we shouldn't take another test to be absolutely certain, but I'm not really worried about that. More confused than anything. I was so certain Tom had to be Luke's son. He was too. Now he doesn't know what to think and I don't either. I obviously now know the affair happened and lasted years, and I know from the letters that Kaylee is Luke's child, or at least both he and Amy seem to believe she is, which confirms they were intimate 15 years ago. Now I'm just wondering for Tom's sake. Who if not Luke is his father? He does kind of look like Luke, but that might just be coincidence. In general, everything was quiet for a few days until it wasn't. Until she finally showed her face. My best friend Amy. I am so happy I installed Ring cameras everywhere as you are about to understand. Sure enough, Amy turned up on my doorstep and asked to talk. She had a relaxed demeanor and did not raise her voice. Assuming she was approaching me on Luke's behalf, I told her that I wasn't interested in talking to her and to just go away. She did not leave, but she didn't make a scene either. She persisted in telling me we needed to have a conversation. The kids weren't home, and did have cameras inside. I was also recording her on my phone and being discreet about it, so eventually I relented and let her in. I don't know if she realized she was on camera. We sat down on the couch, and she instantly got into the reason for her visit. Turns out, she and Luke know, or suspect, that I procured damning material from his laptop. Amy accused me of going through his devices and told me that anything I found was not my business and I needed to delete it. That was all she had to say. No apology, no admission of guilt, didn't take responsibility for her own behavior. Hell, she might have known I was recording her, because she didn't even directly acknowledge what the sensitive material on Luke's laptop actually was. So I confronted her, letting out some of my anger. I asked how she could have the nerve to make demands of me. I asked her why she and Luke would do a thing like this in the first place. Why had they seen fit to spend all these years betraying me? I posed the question that I'd been wondering about for a long time, and as I expected, I got no answer. Literally, Amy didn't seem to really hear me even as I confronted her. She seemed like she was stressed. Panicked even. But she was keeping it under wraps. She ignored my questions and accusations and just kept telling me to delete whatever content from Luke's laptop that I had. She said that if I wanted to divorce Luke, that was my call, but not to drag her into it. Oh, that made me so mad. I kept my temper, but I did snap back that she was already very much in it. Amy just kept repeating herself, telling me to delete whatever I found. So I just refused. I asked her, point blank, why I should. Why did I have any reason to? Amy got more aggressive, raising her voice. She was trying to intimidate me, but I held my ground. She told me that this wasn't about me and that I needed to just do as she said. That it was very important. So I asked again, why? And yet again, she would not answer. So I asked her if Luke had sent her to do this or if she had shown up on her own. No answer to that either. It was like talking to a brick wall. So I asked her to leave. Just as I'd been afraid of, she wouldn't go. She refused to leave until I had deleted everything I'd found in front of her. I couldn't help laughing. I told her no, that wasn't going to happen. This is where I could see her starting to freak out more. In another moment, she got up, ran into the other room, and grabbed my laptop. Before I could stop her, she smashed it on the floor. I really don't know why she thought that would work or get her the outcome she wanted. I think she was just panicking. Obviously, I still have everything, except now I need to buy a new laptop. And sadly, her doing this was out of frame of the camera, but it's fine. All of my important files are backed up, and at that moment I was more concerned that Amy would do something else drastic. She looked like she was going to have a breakdown. I tried again, very calmly, to tell her that she needed to leave or I would call the police. She refused again and just kept repeating her demand that I drop this whole cheating angle and divorce Luke without trying to argue that an affair took place. At that point I just stared at her. At the woman I had considered one of my dearest friends in all the world. And I told her that I didn't owe her anything, but she owed her children the truth. That they had the right to know where they came from. Who Luke really was to them. Amy bristled and told me it was none of my business, that I didn't understand her family and I needed to back off. She kept going back to this idea that I could divorce Luke, but I must not claim he'd had an affair with her. I just told her that I didn't need her permission to handle my divorce how I wanted and told her again to leave. She got more and more desperate, and her anger accelerated to the point that she physically attacked me. I did not expect her to actually do this. I'm not much of a fighter, but I do know the human body pretty well, and where it's weakest. She hurt me pretty badly, but I got her off me. That part was very much on camera, and the whole audio was recorded on my phone. She finally left after that, and I immediately called to file a police report. I had the strangest feeling she'd try something similar and wanted to beat her to the punch. I was able to clean myself up by the time I had to face my kids, and while I downplayed the story, I did not lie to them about why I had a black eye. I told them, for their own safety, to steer clear of Amy. I also sent the footage to Paige and Zach, as well as pictures of my injured state before I cleaned up. They've also printed out the letters that reference Kaylee as Luke's child. I really feel like Amy just screwed herself over on all this. I don't know what her motives were. Was she protecting Luke? Was this his idea? Does she just really not want the world to know she's a homewrecker? Is she covering her own ass? As if people didn't know already? The more of my social circle I talked to, and inform of the basics, the more people confess that they had wondered in the past if Luke wasn't cheating on me, but didn't have any concrete proof. I suppose Amy doesn't want her kids to know who fathered them, which does line up, but I'm still not sure about Tom. I didn't ask Amy about him in particular. I don't know why you guys are so eager for these updates, but I don't mind posting them. I've never blogged about my life before. I'd imagine it feels something like this. Comments. Comment 1. I'm so sorry that she had gone to your home and attacked you. Glad you still have the evidence and didn't back down. I have a feeling that she is wanting you to delete the stuff because maybe your in-laws have threatened to cut her off financially if it is true. Thank you for the update. Hope you're healing. OOP. I could see that being the case. Comment 2. Oh, to be a fly on the wall when Luke finds out that the children he thought were his actually belong to someone else and that his mistress has been cheating on him for years. It would be so satisfying. He will lose not only his wife and mistress but also some of his children. Not to mention losing the respect of the children he had with you. He's headed straight for the downfall. Comment 3. Ooh, I had not considered this angle. How interesting. Another poster said they thought Amy might be so insistent that she be left out of everything because the in-laws will cut her off. And I still think that's a strong possibility, but even more so if the kids aren't actually Luke's. Comment 4. Sweet life. Amy has bought herself a house with these people's help and receives regular financial support every month. She has hooked a sick man, who struggles to leave the house, according to one of OP's comments, and made him her puppet. Even if Luke suspects something, he can't confront Amy, because if he does, Amy could spill everything. She's been in control of the narrative until now, and suddenly the whole world she's built is going to be turned upside down. I think that's why she's freaking out. There's also being humiliated, yes, but she can always leave the city she lives in. Hell, even the country. But as long as the children are the grandchildren of this rich family. But if they're not, she's fucked. Comment 5. What DNA test did the kids use? That was super fast. Amy sounds like she has mental problems. No accountability for her actions. Zero remorse, no empathy. She thinks she can't do any wrong. Sue her for the laptop and press charges for battery or assault. OOP, literally just one of the over-the-counter paternity tests you can buy at a drugstore. If it gets to the point of having tests done in court, those are likely to be more reliable. Oh, you read my mind. Kind stranger, that's exactly what I want to do. Laptop is likely to just be a small claims court, but it's another charge on the pile. My brother secretly had a crush on my wife and even brought my ex to our wedding to ruin it, so I told his pregnant girlfriend he was cheating on her. Please be patient as this will be a lengthy read. My younger brother, Jake, false name, is 25 years old and I am 27. As siblings, Jake and I have always been close, and I assumed our connection was quite typical. Perhaps I didn't realize what was happening. Or perhaps he was really skilled at concealing his actual feelings. My now wife Zara, 24F, and my ex-girlfriend Ruth, 27F, are also included in this story. Zara, Jake and I all attended the same school. I never really interacted with Zara because I was a few years older than them. I was acquainted with Jake and all of his pals, and we occasionally played together, but that was our only connection. Because our interests were so dissimilar, Jake and I began to drift apart by the time I was in my junior year. I didn't really push for a tight relationship with him because I assumed this was a normal part of growing up. We continued to get out from time to time, but we didn't exchange secrets. Boys don't really do that, so I wasn't too bothered by it either. The only significant aspect of this narrative is that Jake was hanging out with a few of his friends and their girlfriends, including Zara, just before I left for college. I want to clarify that nothing improper occurred before anyone calls me a weirdo or groomer for pursuing a 15-year-old. One of the children I met there inquired about my college location. Zara added that it was her ideal university when I told them, and I just said that she was more than welcome to ask for my assistance when she applied. That was it. She was the only person I interacted with at school. After that, I left for college and completely forgot about that little encounter because it didn't matter. I met Ruth in college. We clicked right away when we were classmates. I finally asked her out in my third year of college, though it took some time. We began dating after she said yes. Everything was wonderful in the beginning of the relationship. I felt like I truly understood her because we were going through comparable struggles and wished to live similar lives with one another. After graduating from college, I was able to secure a lucrative position, but Ruth was not as fortunate. We agreed to live together in order to save money, and I was more than happy to assist her. She was applying for jobs all over the place, but for some reason, she was never hired, even after she reached the interview stage. Even though I made enough money to support the two of us, it was still hard to save much because I was still in the early stages of my work, and I knew this was having a negative psychological impact on her. For more than a year, she continued to apply to various locations without success. She was devastated, and I did my best to be there for her. But shortly after, she realized that we could make ends meet with just my paycheck, so she gave up completely. At first, I welcomed the shift because I assumed she was simply worn out from applying and being turned down and that it was having a negative psychological impact on her. She followed my advice to take some time off and engage in enjoyable activities. For 3 or 4 months, this continued. She stopped complaining as much, became happier, experienced less stress, and her mental health significantly improved. I felt pleased for her. In the next few weeks, I hoped to gently encourage her to resume her job search. When I brought up the subject a month later, she reacted negatively, claiming that the thought of going through that terrifying experience once more made her cry. She said she would begin applying when she was ready and asked me not to bring it up again. I accepted since I believed her and didn't want to put undue pressure on her or come out as unsupportive. I was promoted and given a sizable raise 2 years after I started working. Now that I could at last start saving and doing the things I loved, I was ecstatic. I've had to put a lot of my aspirations on hold for the past 2 years in order to provide for 2 people with my paycheck. Naturally, Ruth's mental health issues and my personal interests took a backseat. Now that I had some money to spend on fun, I felt relaxed. However, Ruth began pleading with me to assist in paying for her niece's schooling as soon as she learned that I had been given a raise. Ruth's brother was impoverished and could only work for a few months at a time. He had gotten a lady pregnant and was clueless about how to raise a child, particularly after the woman died and left no family behind. Ruth's brother, who was completely unprepared to care for another human being, took the infant. Ruth pleaded with me, saying that even though she had only met her niece twice, she loved her and would never be able to forgive herself if she couldn't assist her. All of this was getting to be too much for me, so I told her I would give it some thought and ended the conversation. There was a part of me that honestly considered giving her the money, but there was also a nastier part of me that believed it was her niece and that she could get up and get work to support her. That night, I drank a lot, and as I continued to drink, all the logic and reason I had suppressed came flooding back. Since I was in love with Ruth, I never really gave the suspicion that she was attempting to take advantage of me any thought. I was unable to get rid of those emotions though. I was pleased to support her throughout her life, but it seemed excessive to ask me to support her niece as soon as I received a raise, especially at the expense of my own desires. Since I would be stuck in this situation for the rest of my life if I started supporting the niece now, I knew it was time to stand up for myself. I sat Ruth down the following day and informed her that, regardless of how regrettable the situation, I would not be providing financial support for her niece. Additionally, I told her that she was free to take a job and assist the poor child if she felt sorry for her. I didn't care what she did with the money. I refused to listen to her attempt to butt in, claiming that I was being unkind and that a poor youngster needed my assistance. I also informed her that the distribution of domestic duties would shift if she failed to find employment. If she wasn't making a financial contribution, I expected her to do 80% of the tasks because we didn't have any children or pets. I informed her that I wanted a vacation after working tirelessly for the past 2 years to support her while balancing work and home. She needed to help relieve some of my financial burden if she wasn't prepared to aid me financially so that I could have more money for myself. It would be an understatement to say that she began to yell. It was a miracle I didn't leave the conversation with my ears bleeding because I don't think I've ever had the bad experience of listening to such high decibels before. She called me every possible epithet during her lengthy tirade, including misogynistic, manipulative, gaslighting, and financially abusive. I simply needed a break though. If she couldn't do this for me, why were we even partners? The altercation continued for a while. She probably thought that because I've never been confrontational, I would give in. I didn't, which surprised her. For several more days we were at a standstill. She cut me off once more when I attempted to bring up the subject. I realized we were done at that point. I was merely supporting her life and receiving nothing in return, therefore there was no future for me in this relationship. It was a messy split. Because she was unemployed, she had nowhere to go. I informed her that I was done with her and that she should have her problems straightened out by then, but I was willing to give her some money to help her get by for a month or two. She broke down in tears, accusing me of faking and performing the whole drama act. I informed her that my decision was final and that I was no longer interested in this relationship. It could not be saved, and all the solutions she was now offering ought to have been presented to her while we were still together, not as a last resort. The split was nonetheless unpleasant even though I had set her up for a few months. I didn't understand how much dead weight I'd been carrying until she walked out. I could spend so much time and effort on myself. I resumed interests I had given up while in school. These pastimes allowed me to get back in touch with Zara. Zara chose to pursue painting as a career despite not attending my college. Even though it was somewhat of a covert pastime because it wasn't deemed masculine enough, I had always loved doodling as a child. I went since I was curious about the art show in my city. I discovered Zara there. We started chatting after she displayed a piece in the exhibition. I had broken up with Ruth a few months prior to this. When I asked Zara how things were doing, we struck up a conversation that we both found enjoyable. We agreed to get together once more, and she said she would notify me of any upcoming art events in the area. She did. After we reconnected, we gradually began to fall in love. I was already deeply in love with her when I finally asked her out a year later. When I tried to ask Jake about her, he told me that they hadn't spoken since she broke up with the guy from his school friend group. I won't go into all the specifics of my relationship with Zara because they aren't pertinent to this tale, but know that we have always been friendly and equal partners, and I knew she was the person I wanted to marry from a young age. Ruth made a few attempts to contact me during this time, but I always turned her down. Zara knew this every time it occurred, and she was confident enough to trust me. A year into our relationship, Zara and I were already considering marriage when I took her to supper with my family. That has never been a problem because my parents don't meddle in their children's private matters. Zara and my family got along well, and the supper was enjoyable. We were all discussing how amusing it was that life operates in weird ways and how my run-in with Zara again was entirely coincidental. At that point, Jake joked that he was shocked that his high school infatuation would end up becoming his sister-in-law. All those in attendance interpreted it as a light-hearted joke at the moment. Zara even claimed that the only person in their group who was even remotely engaging to converse with was Jake. I didn't give Jake's remark any thought, and the dinner was enjoyable. He also appeared to be really pleased with me. Even though he had been in several relationships, I had no idea that he had been harboring affections for Zara all these years. The problems began when the wedding was being planned. At the time, I didn't see it coming since I never imagined my own brother would do something like this. At first, it was minor infractions that might be explained by his general forgetfulness, such as failing to check in with the caterer or misjudging the time of the dress appointment. I now see that he purposefully caused a wedge between Zara and me in order to somehow call off the wedding. It didn't work. Even though we were both under a lot of stress, we were too resilient to be shaken by a few missed appointments. If anything, Zara's snippiness and short fuse with Jake simply made him feel worse. The wedding day was the last straw. Ruth and I hadn't communicated all this time. To be honest, I had no idea where she was, what she was doing, or how she was doing, and I had no interest in her. I had no idea that Jake had been communicating with her for months before the wedding. If nothing else worked, he intended to get Ruth to convince or pressure me into leaving Zara. He was hoping for some sort of intervention, like drama. Despite not being on the guest list, she arrived as Jake's companion. I was taken aback by this since we expected Jake's girlfriend to be present and everyone in the family had met her. I had a horrible feeling, but I didn't have time to ask him why Ruth was there. Fortunately, Ruth had not yet caught Zara's attention. Ruth got up and began yelling in front of everyone just before Zara was set to go down the aisle. She said that she was the love of my life, that she was willing to take me back, and that I didn't have to marry Zara. There was such a ruckus that Ruth began to weep and beat her feet like a spoiled kid. In all honesty, it was pitiful. Taking Jake by the collar, I rushed over to him and yelled at him to get out. He claimed that Zara and he were destined to be together and that Ruth and I were meant to be together, and that he had come to put things right. I was horrified by the ridiculous rubbish he continued to spew. I requested that my pals take him and Ruth out of there. Zara came out at this moment and I'm not even sure if she understood what was going on, but she strolled calmly over to Ruth, blew her a kiss, slapped her in front of everyone and requested her bridesmaids to start the music. Never in my life have I witnessed anything so legendary. Ruth found it really humiliating, and rather than causing a controversy around me, she simply made a show of herself in front of everyone. Given the situation, the remainder of the wedding proceeded as smoothly as possible. I didn't hope for such a dramatic day, but there wasn't much I could do to change the course of events at that point. Immediately following the wedding, I blocked Jake. He had shown me plenty, and I had little interest in hearing his version of events. The fact that Zara and Jake had never even truly bonded made it all the more reprehensible and nasty. To be honest, he was dangerous to be around and possessed delusions. Above everything, I felt terrible for Violet, his lover. I called Violet a few days after the wedding to find out why she didn't go and why Jake didn't invite her as a guest. Before I chose to interfere in their relationship, I needed to know what type of story he had been telling her. She told me bluntly that I didn't have to act like I liked her and that she would much rather I just be honest with her. I quickly realized that Jake had prevented Zara from attending the wedding by using either Zara or me as an excuse. She urged me to stop acting when I questioned her about it, stating that Jake had already informed her that she wasn't invited, which is why he didn't receive a guest at the wedding. She claimed that she didn't mind him leaving or that we didn't like her, but she was really offended by the fact that the whole family acted as though they liked her when we actually didn't. I firmly informed her that Jake had deceived her and that none of that was real. I pleaded with her to keep our talk private from Jake and our parents for the next 2 weeks, and that Zara and I would meet her when we got back from our honeymoon. I had to provide her a picture of the invitation that was sent to Jake, which obviously contained a +1, because she claimed she wouldn't betray Jake on our behalf. I also validated her attendance with Jake by sending her screenshots of our chats. She claimed not to believe us, so I told her that I understood and that we weren't requesting her trust, but rather that she should remain silent until we could meet and address the misunderstanding. She consented, but I wasn't sure if she would follow through on it. I was eager to expose Violet Jake's true nature, but I could only hope that everything would go smoothly during my honeymoon. Update 1. I had no idea this story would become so well known. As I mentioned, I went on my honeymoon and didn't care to check Reddit, but my inbox is overflowing with requests for updates. Thankfully, nothing untoward occurred during the actual honeymoon. Jake didn't try to phone me, and he was still blocked. Violet texted Jake briefly to let him know that she hadn't discussed our chat and that she wanted to meet as soon as I got back from my honeymoon. A few hours had passed since the meeting. Violet didn't feel safe visiting our house, so we met at a cafe. At first, she was really protective and it was obvious from her demeanor and body language that she didn't want to hear what we had to say. However, we thoroughly explained everything to her. She first didn't believe us and called us crazy for making such a false accusation against Jake. I did, however, ask some acquaintances if they had any wedding films while we were on our vacation. Although there wasn't a single video that showed the full experience, other people were filming, so we were able to piece the incident together in general. After showing Violet those movies, I gave her the rundown on Ruth's entire predicament. At that point, she began to trust us. When she inquired about any past interactions between her and Jake, Zara adamantly denied it. It was difficult for Violet to accept that Jake would be so naive about everything, particularly if nothing was happening. Zara claimed to be equally perplexed. She didn't know how or when Jake fell in love with her, and she thought that she had fallen for him. They had only interacted for 10 or 12 times at most. We informed Violet that we believed it was our responsibility to notify her of the situation and that she might use the information however she saw fit. Additionally, we informed her that we had blocked Jake and would no longer be communicating with him, and we didn't anticipate this changing in the near future. She acknowledged that she could see our point of view, but she also stated that she wanted to speak with Jake right away. We made an effort to talk her out of it, but she felt that she owed it to herself to know if staying with Jake was wise, especially since she was pregnant. Zara and I both congratulated her on her pregnancy and assured her that we would always be there for her. Violet stated that although she was certain she wanted to move forward with the confrontation, she would have to reveal that we had contacted her and told her everything. Zara and I understood that supporting Violet was the correct thing to do, even though it wasn't ideal because we both wanted to avoid getting involved in Jake's turmoil. We assured her that she had our undivided attention and that we would stop at nothing to support her. I am aware that this is not the end, but that was the only thing that transpired during the meeting. For Jake, everything is about to explode up, and he has no idea what's going to happen. Update 2. Although I am aware that this update will be released shortly, this situation has gotten out of hand. I hate accidentally starting this storm, and Jake is going to take a serious hit. Violet wasted no time in getting right to the point after speaking with us. She asked Jake if he was at work when she called him. She stormed over to his office at that precise moment and confronted him after he said yes. It became ugly. She asked if he had done the things we had told her about and walked right into his office, which she was given permission to enter because she had told them she was dropping off some files for him. Violet wouldn't have it when Jake tried to explain that it wasn't the right place to talk and that they would talk about it when he got home. HR had to be summoned up to his floor because there was a good deal of shouting going on. This is where Jake's situation becomes even better. Or worse. Violet identified herself as Jake's girlfriend and revealed that she was pregnant when the HR assistant asked her who she was and why she was making such a fuss. She was shocked when Jake denied it. He categorically denied dating her. More shouting followed, and Violet was finally led away. That day a storm awaited Jake as he returned home. I don't know the specifics, but they got into a huge fight. I do know that it was discovered that Jake had been having an affair with Violet for a considerable amount of time, and that the lady he was having an affair with was the HR assistant who had stepped in to break the news. Jake is therefore doomed. Violet is a no-nonsense woman who doesn't put up with disrespect, therefore I'm positive that she will leave him. It is nearly impossible for her to forgive Jake and condone cheating. Jake's workplace has an extremely stringent no-dating policy about his affair partner. Employees are forced to sign contracts and other documents. His affair partner, let's call her Jane, found out that Jake had been pretending to be a single man and that he had a pregnant girlfriend after the altercation and Violet's tirade at work. When Jane discovered that Jake had been lying to her the entire time and that she was the other lady, she was horrified. Word spread quickly, and Jake is currently facing criticism at work for his actions. Jake is in a lot of trouble because Jane has ties to the company's executives, which makes things worse for him. He will undoubtedly lose Violet, and he may lose his job. Jake has nowhere to go because Violet has also evicted him from the house, which turns out to have been Violet's grandmother's. In the middle of the night, Jake came to see us and gave me an explanation of everything. For some reason, I let him in. Never in my life have I witnessed him so enraged. He would not stop yelling that Zara would one day leave me for him, that I had destroyed his life, and that I never deserved someone like her. I was genuinely concerned for his mental health because of how insane he sounded. He requires assistance, possibly from a psychiatrist or a therapist. Jake also became aggressive with me. I'm aware that I'll be called a fool for not calling the police on him, but ultimately, he's my brother, and I didn't want to add to his troubles. More than anything, I felt sorry for him. It's incomprehensible how one foolish choice can ruin someone's life. He had it all, a fantastic profession, a devoted and caring fiancé, and now a baby on the way, but he blew it all away with a series of foolish choices while living in a bubble of bizarre illusions. Right now, I simply feel bad for him. Update 3. Jake was laid off. Even while this is not shocking, I still feel horrible. Violet no longer wants to interact with him after their breakup. Violet has the full support of Zara, me, and my parents. Jake now believes that because of a harmless prank, I have alienated the entire family. Yes, he is now claiming that his pledge of unwavering love was a hoax. He has been totally shunned by the family, and no one is believing this new story of his. This drama has been annoying me. And I'm not sure where he's residing at the moment. As a recent bride, I can't keep rushing around cleaning up Jake's mess. I'm happy that I brought Violet into this in the first place, but I never imagined things would get so out of control. I don't see how Jake can get over this. It's a complete mess. I don't blame my parents for being upset with him because he threw everything away and was essentially a jerk. I don't know how he came to be this way. We weren't brought up this way. This will be my final update though. Zara and I have come to the conclusion that we must move on from this. Violet and our niece or nephew will always have a home with us and we will support them in any manner they require. We're done though, other than that. I appreciate all of the advice, Reddit. I never imagined that I would have my own dysfunctional story to tell, but that is what it is. My fiancé's quirky food choices are ruining our meals. Now she's disappeared after a fight. Am I the asshole for reaching my limit? Original post. Maybe I'm making too much out of this. Maybe it is a big problem and why I'm posting here. This has been going on since we've dated in college. I'll use last night as an example. I'm always a safe order guy, meaning I get chicken tenders, steak, a burger, orange chicken, etc. It's not that I dislike other food, it's that if I'm doing something crazy I want to buy it, prepare it, cook and serve it, be in control of the whole process. She always orders the special, the catch of the day, the taster's menu, etc. And she invariably says, I don't really like this, I should have just ordered what you got, let's switch. And she grabs my plate. Sometimes I'm able to eat her food, sometimes it really is bad and then I go hungry. I've brought this up with her and she has upfront told me she thinks it makes her quirky and fun, and I've known this since dating her. Last night we went to a sports bar after our league beach volleyball game and we're starving. I just wanted food so I ordered chicken tenders and fries. This dingy sports bar was having a snow crab special, which of course she wanted. I begged her to please just order something they couldn't mess up and she accused me of being so boring. Food came, her crab legs looked, smelled and tasted like they were rotting wax and of course she didn't want it and wanted my tenders. I finally stood up for myself and said no, she could send them back and order her own food. Cue massive fight. She accused me of wasting food, of not cooperating with her and not reading the room, whatever they meant. I told her that no, I was not doing it this time. She started crying and demanded to go home. I said no, I was so hungry I was eating my food. I think she got an Uber to a friend's house and I have not seen her since. I'm fed up. Is this breakup worthy and what should I do about this? Edit. We are engaged and live together. We also share credit cards and bank accounts. Top comments. Comment 1. She sounds insanely entitled and the mentality and temper of a 4-year-old. Why would anyone want to date someone like that? Comment 2. Because she's quirky and fun per as seriously though, she needs to act like an adult. Comment 3. I'm very Joey doesn't share food and if someone pulled this shit with me and expected me to let it slide because they thought it made them quirky and fun, I'd be gone. She sounds annoying AF, extremely entitled and also very slightly psychotic for expecting OP to go hungry. All because she's playing the part of a quirky, fun and adventurous foodie. I expect this has more to do with her testing his limits than just food as evidenced by her blowing up when he suggested, quite logically, she order something else. It's like she wants him to suffer to prove how endearing he finds her. OOP. To be fair to her, I don't think she expects me to go hungry. In fact, I'll bet she's never noticed if I finish her meal or not. Comment 4. That's telling if she doesn't even notice. Makes you wonder what else she isn't noticing about you in the relationship. OOP. I don't want to sound like a crybaby because I have made a choice with her, but yes, I do more of the labor in the relationship. Comment 5. It's only quirky and fun if she eats what she fucking orders. I realize you already know this, but why in the hell should you have to give up your food because of her bad gamble? At the core of it, it sure seems like a, let's see how much of my bullshit he will indulge test. I would say no more would be the correct answer. You haven't seen her since. I suspect she'll be back in touch, and you can give her an opportunity to apologize, but that shit is unacceptable. She owes you an apology, and I sort of doubt you're going to get one. OOP. Your second paragraph was what I've felt for a long time put into words. Thank you. Comment 6. If she's the one labeling it quirky and fun, it isn't. I want to try something, but she needs to order her own food. Who pays the tab? OOP. I mean, technically we both do since we have shared credit cards and bank accounts. Update. Reddit. I don't remember the exact timeline of how things went down on Sunday as far me posting, but original was locked when she texted me at 6 p.m. telling me that I owed her a huge apology for the way I behaved at the sports bar and the volleyball game. I still don't know what that is about. I asked her where she was. She said she would tell me when I apologized. I said I was not going to apologize. She said she needed some time to think whether this relationship was right for her. I told her that I was just exhausted by so much of what she does that I couldn't do it anymore. She hung up and I haven't heard from her since. She hasn't even been by to pick up a change of clothes, so I don't know where she is. I canceled all my credit cards we shared and opened a new bank account and took half out of our share, but she hasn't taken any money out or used her debit card, so I guess I'm a little concerned since for all effect purposes she's disappeared. I'm not too worried now, but if I haven't heard anything by Friday I'll call her parents. I kind of think she's doing this disappearing act for attention. Relevant comments. Comment 1. Wait, so to sum this up, she ignored your reasonable request to order food she knows she'll like, publicly threw a fit when you wouldn't give up your own meal despite being warned that's what would happen, yelled, stormed out, and has been MIA for days. Over a meal? That she could have easily sent back herself. Holy drama, bruh. Like, wow. Bullet dodged, huh? Can you imagine a whole lifetime of ridiculous public tantrums over easily resolvable stuff? Yikes. OP. Well, the meal and whatever it is I did to make her mad at the volleyball game. Comment 2. Text her to pick up her things by X date or you will have it sent to her parents. I think she is doing this for attention and all the more reason you were right to dump her. Tell her parents you broke up and she has not been in contact. Tell them that she did not tell you where she was, but could they check on her? Don't wait on that. The sooner you do this, the sooner you can get her out of your life. OP. Okay, I can do this. Probably a good idea. OOP made a final edit. Edit. I called her parents, they haven't heard from her either, and me calling them now has them worried because they thought she was with me. I'm going to drive her important things over to their house and wash my hands of her. Whatever happens to her is of her own making at this point. My wife's creepy hobby turned into a full-blown conspiracy. She even planted evidence to ruin our neighbor's marriage. Original post. Okay, this sounds insane, but I swear my wife is totally normal otherwise. Which makes this so strange to me. For context, we're both in our later 30s and live in a pretty typical suburban neighborhood where we all know each other. My wife has always loved trashy movies and shows about infidelity, and she eats up true crime about spouses killing their cheating partners too. She just says something about it that makes her morbidly fascinated in her words. Well, a couple months back we had a scandal in our neighborhood where a married couple in the neighborhood divorced because the husband cheated. No, there wasn't a murder or anything like that, but she became obsessed with learning every detail from every neighbor. No matter the occasion, be it a baby shower or cookout, she would bring it up hoping there would be any new information. A month later is when I stumbled on the board in her home office. I was doing some cleaning and I found a massive bulletin board facing away leaned up against the wall. Curiosity got the better of me and I turned it around to find a literal fucking conspiracy board of all our neighbors' pictures with lines of yarn connecting each other like the fucking Pepe Silvia meme. I was totally confused and asked where this was, and she told me it was a hobby she had started recently where she would track rumors or likely candidates for cheating on the board. The yarn represented who was possibly cheating with whom. She had clearly gotten all the images on Facebook or some social media and printed them out and even had a few sticky notes with details. I told her this was creepy and insane, and she said maybe if I was doing it as a man, but she is just having harmless fun as a hobby and she wouldn't be crazy and try to oust anyone based on rumors, she just likes feeling like a detective. She told me to view it like a creative art piece. I was still super weirded out but let it go, or tried. I thought about it a lot. Well, every now and then I admit to checking the board when cleaning, but just a couple days ago I looked to see that now I was on the board with a yarn attached to a neighbor's wife I am casual friends with. I asked her why she would add me if she thought I was cheating, and she said that was a different yarn color for potential matches for cheating. She said if it makes me feel better, she was planning on adding herself to the board soon. Well, I got pissed and kinda lost my temper about it. I told her to get rid of the board or our marriage will be in trouble. Things have been super rocky since. Sorry for the long post, I am starting to feel bad and it hit me more than usual this morning. Should I apologize to her? And before you ask, no, I don't suspect her of cheating. Honestly, I wish she was because it would at least make more sense than this. AITA? Update. Anyway, Jesus Christ. Firstly, appreciate all of the concerns and NTAs. It gave me the courage to approach her and tell her that while I may have overreacted by threatening our marriage, I think it is a creepy thing to do. She apologized and said she would get rid of the board. I thought we were good. Literally 2 days later. 2 days later. Shasterisk, it hits the fan. Our happily married next-door neighbor finds a woman's bra under the bed that does not belong to her. It doesn't take long for the whole neighborhood to find out. Well, my wife is giddy, like jumping up and down for joy. She showed me the board, which she still didn't trash like she promised, and of course the husband was marked with yarn, meaning he was likely to cheat. She told me the board was accurate after all and maybe she should keep her hobby around. I was definitely suspicious, so I looked at the board again later. It looked different from the last time I saw it before the latest scandal. Instead of the yarn connecting to another neighbor, the cheating husband's yarn connected to a post-it with a question mark. Firstly, it was the only question mark there and I swore it wasn't there last time I saw the board. So either she changed it after the cheating to prove a point or slightly before it happened, which made me even more suspicious either way. Now I felt like I was the detective and I was going crazy. I went over to the cheating husband to ask a few questions. The wife was staying with her parents, so it was just the two of us. I asked him if he actually did it and he said no, he would never. Then I asked if my wife had been over recently. He said one day while you were at work his wife asked her to water a plant they had while they were both away and told her where the key was, so yes. I immediately raised an eyebrow. I asked if he still had the bra and he was getting nervous and told me not to get the wrong idea. I said don't worry. He still had the bra and I looked at it. It was my wife's, but one I knew she almost never wore because it was from a lingerie set I bought her one Christmas she said was uncomfortable. I told my neighbor I needed to talk to my wife and ran out, but I told him not to worry. I approached her with the bra and asked her what was going on. She played stupid, but I told her to cut the BS. I asked if she had either cheated on me with him or planted it there. Either way she was in trouble. She confessed to planting the bra and said it was to make me admit her hobby was valid, or something. I flipped on her. I said this was worse than her cheating on me because instead of ruining just our marriage she ruined our neighbors and ours. I demanded she call the wife and admit to everything. Even sending pictures of the board. I even showed the Reddit post which actually helped convince her my wife had planted it rather than cheated with her husband. Well, they made up, but now I have no idea what to do. I am barely speaking to my wife and it is only a matter of time before the entire neighborhood figures this out. I seriously need advice. Relevant comments. Comment 1. I honestly refuse to believe this is real. Your wife is actually nuts. This is insane behavior to have. Comment 2. I was thinking just the opposite. This one is so original it's got to be real. No AI is going to come up with this insanity. That's left to humans. Comment 3. There's I am too interested in the neighborhood gossip. And then there's I planted a bra to ruin my neighbor's marriage and kept a detective board of cheaters. I could forgive the detective board and the gossip interest even if it's not my thing. But planting evidence for an affair is just cruel. Incredibly cruel. Who even thinks like that? My best friend made a move on my husband while I was away with my family. He pushed her away, but now I don't know what to do next. Original post. I think this is the right sub, but if not, I'm sorry. I can't think straight right now. We, 37F39M, have been together for 15 years, married for 12 and we have 4 kids. We've always had a wonderful loving relationship and have both been amazing partners to each other. My mom is not doing well health-wise and I flew out to her with our youngest on Friday morning and we will be flying back tomorrow night. A few hours ago my best friend called me crying and said that she got into a major fight with her husband after she found he cheated and asked if she could come over. She had forgotten that I wasn't in town and I talked to her for a little while and tried to calm her down. I also called my husband explaining the situation and asked if it was okay for my best friend to spend the night in our guest room and he was fine with it. I took our iPad with me to keep our youngest entertained while at my parents' place. It is logged into my husband's Apple ID email so his messages and calls show up on it. When I went to put it on charge I saw tens of messages from my best friend to my husband. I found it strange since they were supposed to be under the same roof and I knew it was wrong to snoop, but I ended up reading the messages anyway. Long story short, something happened between them. My husband kicked her out and my best friend wants to keep whatever it is a secret, but my husband says that I deserve to know. I don't know what to do or think now and I have no one I can talk to about this. What am I supposed to do now? Relevant comments. Comment 1, at least he wants to tell you about it. You should call him and ask him what it is that you deserve to know. It might just be that she made a move on him and he got mad and kicked her out, but contact him now. Comment 2, same. She's just been cheated on, and she likely wanted revenge, but in her distress, she picked the nearest man to her, just made more of a mess of her life. Completely valid reason to cut her out. Also, if OP values the friendship, she has room to be understanding without looking foolish since her husband is loyal. She 100% owes him a huge high five. I would personally understand and forgive, but keep her at arm's length for years, if not forever. Just because I understand doesn't mean I'm going to give you access to my personal life again. About the husband, yes, loyalty is expected and mandatory. No, that doesn't mean that most people wouldn't take low-hanging fruit if offered. He isn't like most. That itself deserves acknowledgement since you saw it in practice before your eyes. Having verifiable proof your partner won't play you even if they reasonably could get away with it is worthy of celebration. Not necessarily because he deserves a treat, but because you now know you are truly safe with your back turned. If he kissed her or SMD'd, then he can go get fucked though. Update. You guys were right. I wanted to have the conversation face to face and waited till I got back a few hours ago. We talked after we had dinner and all the kids went to bed. After my now former friend showered and freshened up, my husband gave her leftovers from dinner and they talked about her husband and the situation with her husband, and out of nowhere she tried to sit in his lap and tried kissing him, and my husband pushed her off and she tried again and told her that she had to leave. My husband admitted that he was tempted to call me late last night but didn't want to add more to my plate while I was with my mom and wanted to physically be there when he told me. I have talked to her since and she is back at her place and her husband is not there. She has been very apologetic and is saying that she wasn't in the right headspace and made a mistake trying something with my husband and is begging me to not break apart our friendship. To be honest, I feel bad for her, but she knows how much I love my husband and my family and she was willing to ruin everything, and I can't forgive that or rationalize it. My wife cheated with her gym trainer and demanded half of everything during our divorce, but my father secretly controlled our house and savings. Though here I am, I never imagined I would be publishing. Currently 35 years old, I have worked for a local company for about 10 years. I suppose I'm able to remain cool through all of this as I've always been a somewhat pragmatic man, level-headed and all that. Still, I wed Kathy, a 33-year-old. Although we have been married for 2, we have been together for almost 5. No children. Looking back today, this is most likely a benefit. Kathy has not worked since we were married. Originally in marketing, she wanted to take a break and concentrate on us once we tied the knot. I figured it was temporary and didn't mind. I made plenty for both of us. Our dwelling is modest yet enough to be comfortable. Our savings account is respectable. Nothing ostensive. Kathy had stayed at home most of her life, but suddenly things started to change. Though I can't say exactly when I first observed Kathy being aloof. When she went to the gym or with friends, she would stay out longer. She would get defensive when I inquired what was going on and stopped being loving. I first attributed it to stress or a normal marital slump, but as the weeks passed I couldn't get rid of the uneasy feeling. And so, lad, was I right. One evening Kathy was in the bathroom when her phone buzzed with a message. I looked over at it out of pure instinct. From a guy called Derek. It was. At first I didn't give it much thought, but something about the phrasing of the message felt strange. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow, babe," it said. Opening it let me discover what confirmed my greatest worries. For months, she had been seeing Derek, her gym teacher. The books were unambiguous, full of future plans that obviously did not call for me. Frozen, I sat there fixed on the phone. It surprised me. The woman I married and the person I trusted was cheating on me. Still, I felt numb rather than angry or depressed. I knew I had to face her without losing my calm, maybe the shock or maybe my pragmatic nature kicking in. I gently handed her the phone when she emerged from the toilet and asked her to explain. She first tried to reject it, claiming it was only a joke and nothing. She understood, though, that lying had no purpose when I read some of the books back to her. She murmured, "I want a divorce." Not even guilt, an apology, or regret. Nothing. Simply a chilly, distant remark. She said she had been seeing Derek for some time and that she was unhappy in our marriage now. She was leaving me for him. She paid no attention to sugarcoating it. Her next action, though, truly set off something. She began discussing splitting assets without pausing. She claimed she wanted half of everything. The house, the funds, everything we had created together. She even said she earned it as she gave her career to help me. The nerve astonished me. Still, I kept cool. Perhaps it's because I had already emotionally checked out at that point, or perhaps because deep down I knew something she didn't. I agreed then. I assured her I wouldn't fight her for a divorce if she wanted one. She could have half what she believed I possessed. She was shocked, most likely anticipating an emotional collapse or argument. I was not about to provide her with that gratification though. Almost all of our assets were in my dad's name, something Kathy did not know. And something I felt not necessary to share with her. You know, my father is really astute. He advised me to name all of my key assets in his name years ago when I first began earning good income. Whether it be debt, lawsuits, or, as it turns out, a cheating partner, he said it would provide a safety net should something ever go wrong in the future. I didn't give it much thought at the time. It appeared only like wise financial planning. So I knew Kathy wouldn't be receiving what she expected when she insisted on half of everything. On paper, I had little, just a modest bank account, a car in my name, and a few miscellaneous oddities and ends. The house. In technical terms, it belonged to my dad. Most of my savings are here. Also is under my dad's supervision in accounting. I advised us to handle things through mediation instead than engaging in a messy legal fight. For both of us, I reasoned it would be simpler and less expensive. She accepted, obviously intending to leave with a substantial portion of my assets. She had no idea, though, that this arrangement with my dad had been in place for years and that, to be honest, I had ignored it until the divorce discussion started. Though I can't deny that I'm appreciative of my father's foresight, it wasn't quite what I had hoped for. Most of the funds and investments Kathy was looking at were officially owned by him, as was our property. Living modestly enough that nobody, including Kathy, really questioned it, I had always maintained a low financial profile in my own name. I told my dad right when the divorce process began. Though he was not happy about the circumstances, what father would be, he realized the need of keeping things quiet. We asked a lawyer simply to be sure everything was legally sound and perfect. As it happened, everything was in perfect order. Though Kathy could demand whatever she wanted, there wasn't much in my name for her to take. Kathy moved quickly. She never wasted time. She engaged an aggressive divorce lawyer, one of those sharks that guarantees to grab whatever they can. I also engaged a low-key but reputable attorney who specialized in instances similar to mine where complex financial variables were at work. Though I didn't want to create a major scene out of this, I also wasn't going to allow Kathy and her attorney to harass me. Asset disclosure, the first phase of the divorce procedure, did not go as Kathy had hoped. I set everything out exactly as mandated by law. Her lawyer's assured smile wavered though, as she realized how little my name really registered. Though I could tell they were both perplexed, perhaps even suspicious, there was not much they could do about it. I gave honest information. There were no hidden assets. She then began berating me right there, calling me names and accusing me of lying. Like I stated though, I offered everything I had. Saying we would talk about everything once she had cooled down, I departed following many accusations and shouted shouts. Here I am now, looking at Reddit since I'm not sure if I handled things the correct manner. So Reddit, am I the asterisk bleep asterisk for consenting to give her half of what's mine knowing she's not really getting anywhere near what she expects? Update 1. So, things are beginning to heat up. Kathy was totally incredulous following the first asset revelation. Her attorney was not much better, and she obviously felt I was hiding something. When they saw the meager statistics on paper, he had a wonderful expression. They soon began asking for a more extensive probe. Kathy persisted in questioning where all the money was, the property, the investments, the presumed savings we had. It astounded her that, following years of marriage, there was less to divide. Thinking I had stowed money in secret accounts, her lawyer hired a forensic accountant right once to probe further. I was first a bit anxious, not because I had anything to hide but more because I knew this would simply slow down the entire process. After reviewing everything once more and consulting my attorney though, I discovered there was nothing legally they could uncover. Every item I had said was exactly factual and no trace would lead them to the assets under my dad's name. Kathy's face started to show irritation as the probe dragged on. She was used to getting her wants, but this time there was nothing for her to grab. She seemed unable to understand the reality that she was leaving with next to nothing. Kathy's next action was to try to defend her major contribution to our way of life and my job. She said that by keeping home and running the house, she had helped me to concentrate on my profession and forward my career. Although I'll say that occasionally having her handle things at home was beneficial, it wasn't as if I were operating a Fortune 500 firm. Being a mid-level accountant, my employment has been somewhat steady for years now. She could not point to any dramatic increase in my income that she could declare, asterisk I helped him get there asterisk. She still made an effort though. Though the truth is she hadn't worked long before deciding she wanted to remain home, She pushed the notion that she had sacrificed her own career in marketing to support me. Not anything I ever requested of her. She made this decision even then. Her attorney brought this up often, trying to present me as someone who had profited from her sacrifice, but once more, there was not much evidence to back that assertion. They even tried once to include my parents in the process. Kathy intended to show that I had been hiding assets with their help or that they had been paying me money under the table. I became quite enraged with this section. My parents had nothing to do with this. Pulling them into it was a cheap blow. Luckily, my attorney was able to stop those efforts really rapidly, although Kathy was obviously becoming rather desperate. Kathy chose to handle things on her own as the divorce processes dragged on. She was going to attempt and damage my name in other ways if she cannot get what she wanted via the courts. She began confiding in everyone in our social circle that I had been financially abusive during our marriage and had been keeping money from her. The lies she was disseminating really astounded me. Mutual friends would tell me about how she was doing and about how I was leaving her with nothing. How I had coerced her into believing we had more than we had. She even went on social media, leaving cryptic yet critical remarks on betrayed narcissistic partners. Of course, some people supported her. There are always those who would side with the person who appears to have been wronged. But most of our closer pals were aware of it. They knew I was not the kind to act in such a manner. Seeing her try to damage my reputation just because things weren't working out annoyed me, but I tried not to let it get to me. I knew the truth. The individuals who truly counted knew it too. Apart from that, I had more important things to concentrate on, such as ensuring she didn't take me for more than what was fair. Kathy was working on a smear campaign, and I was ensuring all my bases were addressed. My attorney and I were in close contact to ensure we possessed all the data required to support my side of the narrative. Every contact I had with Kathy, every demand she made, and every time she tried to cast me as the bad guy I recorded. Having such documentation would be absolutely vital, I realized, should this ever make it before court. I began also compiling proof of her romance with Derek. Although divorce settlements usually don't revolve much on adultery, I wanted to make it apparent she wasn't the victim here. I had screenshots of the books she shared with him, images they had taken together, and even quotes from some of her acquaintances who knew about the affair but remained silent. I merely wanted the truth to come out. I wanted not to disgrace her. Besides that, I started getting ready for the unavoidable aftermath. Things would go bad once the truth came out and she discovered she wasn't getting half of anything. I so maintained my distance, keeping my attention on my work and personal life and ensuring I had everything ready for the next stage of the divorce. Derek's response added one element of intrigue to all of this. Kathy appeared all for it when she originally told him she wanted to leave me for him. Their small romantic notion of beginning a new life together. But Derek started withdrawing as soon as the divorce processes started to get disorganized. As it happens, he wasn't quite as committed to Kathy as she believed. Based on what I have heard, he began to have cold feet upon realizing that being with her would require handling her financial problems. Though Kathy was ready to commit to it, she was expecting this great new life with Derek. Actually, the incident caused word of mouth to spread about his beginning loss of gym patrons. People apparently wish not to deal with a trainer who is known to have interacted with married ladies. Derek has been attempting to remove himself from Kathy lately, and she is beginning to realize perhaps this was not the fairy tale she had in mind. Though I nearly feel horrible for her, I then remember what she has done. Regarding myself, I'm having mixed feelings. I feel justified on one hand. I'm happy I guarded my assets and that Kathy isn't leaving with what she expected. I can't help but feel a little depressed though at the same moment. For all, this was my marriage. Once I adored Kathy. I felt we would lead a life together. Though I know it's for the best, seeing it come apart like this is difficult. Update 2. Since my last report, things have veered somewhat wild. Kathy is becoming desperate and showing in the worst possible manner. She's trying to make my life horrible since she understands she won't get the expected payback from this divorce. The most recent is her threatening to damage my job and reputation at work. She told me straight out that she would make sure everyone at my company knew what a scumbag I was, should I fail to make things simpler for her, give her more money. She first confused me about what she meant, but it soon became evident when she started showing up at my workplace unexpectedly. She was cool the first time, seeming as though she simply needed to communicate. She snapped though when I informed her there was nothing else to talk about. She began speaking, stating things like, "I'll make sure everyone here knows the truth about you." Luckily, I managed to get her out of there before things got more out of hand, but she is clearly becoming erratic. Her behavior at home, or rather, her temporary residence with her parents, has been chaotic too. She returned home with her parents after learning she would not be walking away with the predicted large payment. According to what I've heard, her situation hasn't been doing great. Though they are not really happy with how things have turned out, her parents are supportive. I suppose even they see through her victim play. According to mutual acquaintances, she has been acting as though she is about to have a breakdown, lashing out, and fighting with her family. The legal side of things has grown more difficult as well. Kathy's attorney is making every effort to get dirt on me. Even though my attorney has consistently told my parents that assets are not up for grabs in this divorce, they filed motions to subpoena my parents' financial data. Though it's obviously meant to rattle me, it isn't succeeding. Though clearly meant to rattle me, it is not working. In search of anything that may imply I was hiding assets or under-the-table income, Kathy's team also filed a motion to depose my colleagues at work. Although they are grabbing at straws, handling it is taxing. Every time we believe we have attended to one of their needs, they return with another. The whole thing feels like an endless chess game right now. Kathy and her staff try to offset every action I do, but owing to my lawyer and the strict legal protections my father established years ago, I have been one step ahead. Still, it's taxing, and I'm not sure how long I can keep this going until we find ourselves before real courts. Regarding legal processes, we have previously twice tried mediation. Actually, both times it has been a total fiasco. After roughly 20 minutes, Kathy insisted on half of the house and our money, therefore ending the first session. Though Kathy wouldn't hear it, my lawyer presented the reality of the matter, that the house was in my father's name and that there wasn't quite as much money as she believed. She bolted, charging me with lying and claiming that the mediator was biased against her. The second try was not much improved. Kathy arrived this time carrying a set of utterly irrational expectations. She demanded half of all our savings, even if they hardly exist, full ownership of the house, and alimony for at least 5 years. Kathy lost it when my attorney coolly reiterated once more her lack of entitlement to any of that. She began screaming about how I was leaving her empty and about how she had given all for me. Though inside I was boiling, I sat there attempting to keep cool. She was the one who desired the divorce, cheated, and now she's behaving as though I am the one destroying her life. Unbelievably beautiful. That session made it quite evident that, whether I like it or not, this divorce is headed for court. Besides that, Kathy has been using money borrowed from friends and relatives to pay her legal bills. She obviously didn't want the divorce to linger for this length of time, and today she finds herself short-funded. Though I'm not really clear how she intends to keep paying her aggressive attorney, that's not my concern. She acts more erratically the more desperate she gets. Mutual acquaintances have informed me she spends much of her time at home complaining to anybody who would listen about how I have destroyed her life. Some of her friends have started separating from her since they are tired of the drama and her continuous playing the victim card. Kathy seemed to be losing what she expected to get out of this divorce. I have been trying my best to remain cool under all of this and manage things tactically. I refute every new charge or demand Kathy makes with facts. I have nothing to conceal, hence whatever financial record they ask for I present. More than I can say for Kathy's team, my attorney has been outstanding in ensuring we are strictly obeying the law. I have also been trying to honor the privacy of my parents. Although Kathy's attempts to pull them into this mess irritate me, fortunately legal safeguards prevent her from gaining access to their financial records. Still, her even trying indicates just how dire she is. She seems to believe that, if she digs deep enough, she will uncover some buried gem I have been holding from her, yet, nothing comes of search. Update 3. When the day of the court hearing finally arrived, one would not be able to adequately describe the stress. Kathy arrived swinging and started to testify first. She made it plain that she thought I had been keeping assets from her all along. She said I lied to her about our actual wealth, concealed money in hidden accounts, and changed our budget. Emotional, she portrayed herself as the victim left with nothing after giving her career over to help me. At one point she was crying on the stand, discussing how she had trusted me with everything only to be shocked by the divorce and my alleged financial dishonesty. The big blow, though, came when my attorney offered proof of her involvement with Derek. The jury, the judge, everyone could understand what was actually going on as soon as the books, images, and specifics of her relationship with him surfaced. Before my very eyes, Kathy's victim story began to fall apart. She even tried to minimize the affair at one point, claiming it was a mistake and had nothing to do with the divorce, but by then the damage was done. Her reputation was damaged, and it was abundantly evident that her financial needs were motivated more by avarice than by anything else. When it came time for me to testify, I tried to remain cool and follow the facts. My attorney had done a good job of preparing me. I knew that becoming defensive or angry would not strengthen my case. I went over everything, how my assets had been established in my father's name for years, how I had given complete financial reports, and how I had tried to manage the divorce amiably through mediation. I also testified on Kathy's threats, unpredictable behavior, and ongoing smear campaign activity. My attorney demonstrated how unfounded all the charges she had leveled at me, publicly and in court, by providing documentation of each. We presented the truth about our finances. My father owned the house, our savings were meager at best, and she could not claim any secret treasure of money. The judge apparently valued my simplicity. Though I didn't try to denigrate Kathy, I also didn't sugarcoat the truth of what had happened. The facts were unambiguous, thus I took care to express them free from drama or hyperbole. During the trial, a few important witnesses were summoned. Their evidence helped to close the business. First, my dad spoke first. He described the financial plan we had set in place years ago, how the property was in his name, how the investments were under his management, and how all of this was done as a kind of long-term financial security. He made it abundantly evident that Kathy had no legal title to these assets and that they were his, not mine. Next on schedule was one of my co-workers from the office. My colleague promptly stopped Kathy's team's attempt to claim that I had been hiding money by getting bonuses or under-the-table payments off course. He testified on my regular, open pay and meager income. There were no hidden sources of money or secret bonuses, only the simple payback I'd mentioned. These testimonies were absolutely essential in demonstrating Kathy's charges lacked basis. The judge could see that Kathy had simply a straightforward open financial arrangement that she had never bothered to learn about, not any major scheme on my side. The judge decided at last following days of testimony and legal arguments. Hearing the words, "the divorce would be awarded in my favor," was a great comfort. Kathy insisted on half of the house and our money, and we were flatly denied both. Kathy had no title to the house or most of our possessions, the judge said, since my father owned them. Her only award was a meager sum of alimony, and even that was only temporary. Barely enough to pay her legal bills, let alone the lifestyle she hoped to keep. The judge made it plain that his decision included Kathy's affair and her lack of household financial contribution. He judged based on her attempts to present herself as a victim. She was seen through. I felt a great weight drop off my shoulders when the decision was announced. That moment washed away the months of anxiety, the continuous accusations, the dread of losing everything. Legally, I knew I was in the clear. Kathy, on the other hand, did not find the decision appealing. She started crying as soon as the judge concluded, yelling that the system was unfair and that I had misled her out of what was rightly hers. She left her attorney looking frustrated as she bolted from the courtroom. Though I'm not sure what she expected, it was quite evident she hadn't gotten ready for the potential of losing. For me, the first reaction was relief. I left the courtroom after thanking my attorney for a job well done over the entire process. Texts from friends and relatives praising me on the result were flashing on my phone. Word had gone fast, and the neighborhood was already debating the matter. Knowing the truth had come out and that I could at last start my life felt terrific. But Kathy was still not done. She had a complete collapse in front of a small gathering outside the courtroom. She began yelling about my lying and system manipulation as well as her intended appeal of the ruling. She lacks the means to accomplish that, hence the dilemma is her attorney made it abundantly evident during the proceedings that she was running low on money. From what I have heard, she is still borrowing from friends and relatives simply to get by. Having said that, I really appreciate my father's counsel and insight on financial protection. Whose kind of mess I would be in right now without his assistance. My friends, relatives, and colleagues, who stayed with me even when Kathy was circulating accusations and attempting to damage my reputation, have my thanks as well. Looking ahead, I have hope. Though I know it will take time to completely heal from this, both emotionally and financially, I am ready to start my life. From all of this, I have gained some insightful knowledge. I will not be repeating the same errors. Right now, I'm mostly trying to get back to normal and savor the tranquility that results from closing this chapter at last. My brother had an affair with my fiancée, got her pregnant before my wedding, and my parents supported him over me. This will be a lengthy one, and it's as disorganized as it sounds. Though there is much to explore here, I will attempt to keep it as succinct as feasible. Whether someone believes this or not doesn't matter. It's just so ridiculous that I have to voice this. I won't sugarcoat anything either, but I will steer clear of any information that would allow someone unfamiliar with the circumstances to identify myself. Up until a few months ago, I was engaged to my 5-year girlfriend. We will call her Sarah. 32-year-old guy. Let's call my younger brother Mike. He is 29 and has always been the perfect child in our family. I have to provide some background on my family and how we came to this place if I truly want to grasp the depth of this betrayal and why it struck me so deeply. Mike could not do anything wrong in our parents' view growing up, whereas I was continuously chastised for the most minor transgressions. This was clear and severe, not simply ordinary sibling rivalry or minor partiality. Mike broke something, and I would be accused. I would be the one grounded while he started a fight. He would get a new video game console if we both received straight A's. I would get a pat on the back and be advised to keep it up. Our parents, Tom and Linda, always found a justification for their actions. Mike's younger brother requires more attention. Given you are the older one, you ought to know better. We have to be careful with Mike, he is just more sensitive. I felt unworthy and unwanted in my own house from the never-ending assault of double standards and gaslighting. The preference just grew as we aged. When I enrolled on a partial scholarship in a decent college, my parents hardly noticed. But they threw Mike a big celebration and purchased him a car to drive with when he decided to enroll in community college. Not mind that for years I had been riding 5 miles each way to my part-time work. I left right away to get away from the poisonous surroundings at home. I worked 2 jobs, pay debt, and negotiate college. Mike left a semester later, saying he didn't belong in college. Our parents entirely agreed with his choice, complimenting him for knowing himself and for not fitting social norms. Over the next 5 years, they even funded his string of failing companies. My family always found a way to drag me back in, even with the space I tried to create between us. Holiday dinners were a torture of subdued jabs and not quite subtle comparisons. "Oh, are you still working at that entry-level job?" "Well, Mike is considering launching another company. He is quite entrepreneurial." Not that I was really laying a solid career while Mike was devouring our folks' retirement money. I tried to keep a friendship with Mike despite all. Though it was always one-sided, he remained my brother after all. I would try to connect, reach out, and he would either ignore me or find some way to make the discussion into a competition he might win. Should I get promoted, he would suddenly have a great opportunity right ahead. If I began dating someone, he would also magically be in a committed relationship. I met Sarah in one of my attempts to get back in touch with Mike. We clicked right away as she was friends with one of his brief relationships. Smart, humorous, compassionate, and extremely beautiful, Sarah was everything I had ever wanted in a companion. We began dating, and for the first time in my life I felt really cherished and joyful. My parents were inevitably less than delighted. They questioned what Sarah saw in me and made disparaging remarks about how she was out of my level. Mike, on the other hand, started abruptly to show great interest in my life. Wanting to know everything about Sarah, he would ask about her non-stop. I was simply glad he seemed to be interested in something from my life at the time. Looking back, I ought to have spotted the warning signs. After 1 year of dating, Sarah and I moved in together and things were fantastic. We both drove, had decent jobs, and discussed the future. I began to feel as though perhaps, just maybe, I could have the great profession, loving partner, maybe even children someday that I had always wanted. On our 4th anniversary, I asked Sarah. It was simply a peaceful supper at home and a moving speech, nothing spectacular. She answered yes, and I thought I was on top of things. We agreed to engage in a protracted process and slow down wedding preparation. We had our whole life ahead of us. Or so I believed. We were not in a hurry. To put it mildly, the responses were mixed when we told my family we were engaged. Saying, "Oh, how nice," in a tone that implied it was anything but, my mother slapped on a fake grin. "Grunt," my dad murmured. "Good luck with that," then turned back to watch the TV. Mike, though, had the most unusual response. He praised us, but his smile seemed almost predatory and wrong. I dismissed it then, attributing it to my own fears. Work stress and wedding plans occupied the next year. Working long hours at our jobs, Sarah and I were saving money for the wedding and a down payment on a house. Though we saw less of each other than we used to, I reasoned it was only a phase. Every marriage experiences difficult times. Looking back, I ought to have seen the warning signals. Sarah grew more aloof, constantly on her phone, grinning at texts from someone she would rapidly claim to be merely an acquaintance from work. She began leaving more with her pals, arriving late home smelling of cologne and wine. I did, however, entirely trust her. I never even gave her any thought regarding possible cheating, let alone with my own brother. Sarah started acting somewhat strangely over 4 months ago. She was temperamental, restless, and often sick. Thrilled with the possibility, I considered perhaps she might be pregnant. We had not been trying, but we discussed wanting children at last. Imagining nursery colors and baby names, I began to arrange how I would help her. She dropped the bomb one evening after sitting down with tears in her eyes. Though not mine, she was pregnant. I looked shocked. Our hectic schedules had caused us not to be close in a while, but I never anticipated she would cheat on me. She broke down totally and mumbled, It's Mike. When I inquired who the father was, my whole universe collapsed in that instant. Everything I knew, everything I had built my life around, came toppling. I found it difficult to breathe. I had no ideas. I could only feel this intense loss and treachery. Sarah tried to clarify. Her words came out in a hurry between sobbing. Apparently, it began during our engagement party. Mike had cornered her and informed her she was making a mistake in marriage. Playing on her insecurities, he reassured her she could do better and he could give her everything I couldn't. They had been having an affair for months, so it was not just a one-time occurrence. That evening, I sent Sarah out. I couldn't stand to look at her or be in the same room as the lady who had so totally betrayed me. She begged me to pardon her. Said it was a mistake. Said she loved me. But all I could think of was how many times she had lied to my face. She had been with my brother how many times wearing the ring I had given her? I phoned Mike after Sarah went. Not even now can I recall what I said. All of it was a haze of hurt and wrath. At first, he attempted to seem cool, saying it was only a drunken error and that it had no bearing on anything. He became hostile and responded, "Well, maybe if you'd have been a better fiancé, she wouldn't have come to me." When I pressed him, I observed red. Ready to do anything that would cause him regretting what he said, I got in my car and headed to his flat. Though I'm not sure what I intended to do, our parents were already there when I arrived. Mike apparently initially phoned them, crafting some narrative about how Sarah had seduced him and how terrible he felt. And you also know what? They came to believe him. Always they do. While my dad merely stood there with his arms crossed, looking disappointed in me, of course, not in his dear Mike, my mom started lecturing me about forgiveness and family right away. They wouldn't listen when I tried to describe exactly what happened. They insisted that since family comes first, I should forgive Mike and help Sarah through the pregnancy. I forgot. Years of pent-up wrath and bitterness spilled forth. I told them just what I thought of their distorted sense of devotion. How they had always favored Mike at my cost. How they never once stood on my side or helped me. Mike was dead to me, I informed him. He was no longer my brother. Since they no longer had me, I advised my parents they could have the son they had always desired. Ignoring their calls and pleads, I bolted. Without a goal in mind, I drove for hours just desiring to get away from everything and everyone. When I got home, I had hundreds of missed calls and messages, some from Sarah begging for another opportunity, some from Mike alternately between apologies and accusations, but most were from my parents, demanding that I grow up and atone. I seldom ate, hardly slept, ignored them all. Using all of my accumulated vacation time, I called out of business. I avoided everybody and found it intolerable to have to explain what had happened. Trying to find where I'd gone wrong, I simply sat in my apartment going back over every minute of my relationship with Sarah and every contact with Mike. 3 months have gone by now. To handle all this turmoil, I changed my number, relocated to a new apartment and began treatment. Still, my family won't let go. Even with my best attempts to cut touch, they find ways to meddle in my life. Starting to show up at my place of employment, they are trying to ambush me and drive a reconciliation. Crying about how I'm separating the family, my mother corners me in the parking lot, gruff voicemails from my dad on how I should man up and pardon Mike. Mike has personally tried to approach me on a few occasions, but thus far I have been able to dodge him. To guilt trip me into forgiving Mike, they have even dispatched flying monkeys, that is, extended family members. Suddenly blowing my phone, aunts, uncles, cousins I haven't spoken to in years are reminding me how important family is and how I should let bygones be. They seem to be living in some other world where what Mike and Sarah did was only a minor error rather than a life-altering one. The most recent growth is yesterday Sarah sent me a note. She intends to co-parent with Mike and is keeping the baby. And now, guess what? About becoming grandparents, my parents are over the moon and totally overlook the circumstances of how it happened and the nasty comments my mother and father made when Sarah was with me. Apologues and explanations abound in the letter, which discussed how Mike and she had discovered true love in trying circumstances. She even dared to add she hoped the child will benefit from us all being friends someday. I am at the very end of it. Part of me wants to simply sever ties entirely and start over somewhere else, perhaps go to another state, change my name, create a new life free from knowledge of this mess. Another side of me, though, is so enraged that I want to stay and fight so they may realize how screwed up things are overall. Not sure what to do going forward. Every sphere of my life has suffered from betrayal. Alone with my thoughts makes me uncomfortable. I never gave dating any thought either. I get terrified thinking of depending on someone like that. Folks who believe I should choose the high road and reconcile with my family, as if I am the one in the wrong for not wanting to play happy families with the folks who most wounded me, have lost friends over this too. The idea of Sarah and Mike having a kid together, a child that ought to have been mine, is like a continual knife in my stomach. Logically, the youngster is innocent in all this. The baby's parents are lying, cheating scumbags. It is not the baby's fault. But I cannot feel anything nice about its existence. My parents have begun discussing my obligation to participate in the lives of the child and my role as an uncle. I get sick physically at the idea. How am I expected to approach this child without spotting the final emblem of my brother's treachery? Reddit, I suppose my question is. Am I the expletive for not forgiving my brother and ex-fiancé? Is it bad of me to wish to terminate relations with my family over this? Any guidance on how to move forward would be much valued, since right now I feel as though gaslighting and treachery are drowning me in the sea. I understand this was lengthy. If you have read thus far, thank you. In a sense, just writing all this out has been relieving. I'm not sure what I should anticipate from publishing this. Maybe validation, guidance, or maybe just the opportunity to yell into the void and have someone, anybody, hear me. Edit. Holy mess, this exploded overnight. I appreciate all of your support and counsel. The response overwhelms me, and it will take some time to look over all the comments. Nonetheless, I wanted to answer some typical queries. 1. Certainly, I have discussed a restraining order against my family with a lawyer. It is under work. 2. No, I am not intending to interact with the baby. Although the child is not at fault, I cannot be engaged without losing my sanity. 3. For anyone curious about my employment, I have previously discussed the matter with HR. They are sympathetic and aware. They have given me the opportunity to work from home more regularly and raised front desk security levels. I appreciate their awareness. 4. Many of you have inquired whether I have given any thought to migrating to another city or state. I am very definitely considering this. There are offices of my company in various other cities, hence a relocation could be feasible. I am balancing the advantages and disadvantages. 5. To those advocating DNA testing, Sarah came clean about the affair and the chronology fits. I have no cause to think the child isn't Mike's. Even if by some miracle it turned out to be mine, I'm not sure I could ever look at that child without considering this. 6. The volume of persons relating such tales has overwhelmed me. Knowing how frequent this kind of treachery is breaks my heart, but it also curiously comforts me since I'm not alone. I appreciate everyone's vulnerability and sharing. 7. To the person asking whether I had thought about suing Mike for alienation of affection, I investigated it, but sadly, my state does not accept it. Though right now I'm not sure I have the stamina for a legal fight. 8. Several have noted that Mike's actions seem egotistical. Many of the articles I have begun reading about narcissistic personality disorder speak to me. Though not justification, some of his behavior helps me to comprehend. 9. For anyone wondering about Sarah's family, they are as startled and repulsed as one would anticipate. They have cut off communication with her and contacted me to give their support. Though little consolation, I value it. 10. To the person wondering whether I considered having children of my own someday, to be honest, this whole experience has made me doubt whether I want a family at all. I'm trying, though, not to make any major decisions while I'm still digesting things. Though I'll let you know if anything noteworthy occurs. Right now I'm concentrating on recovery and forward movement. Once more, thanks to Reddit. More than you would realize, you have contributed. Your guidance and encouragement have really been a lifeline amid trying circumstances and have given me much to consider. Though I can't answer every remark, kindly know I'm reading them all and they help me feel less isolated in this. Update 1. Hey Reddit, it's been a total rollercoaster 2 weeks since my last post. First of all, I want to thank everyone for the great advice and support. Reading over all your responses has been both sad and yet consoling. I never anticipated my post to explode like that. The frequency of this sort of treachery is disorganizing. To put it mildly, the last several weeks have been demanding. Recall my remark of working on a restraining order. That descended into a complete ordeal though. We had a hearing booked after my attorney turned in the paperwork. Given the facts and ongoing harassment, I felt it would be simple. I corrected myself. With their own attorney, an elegant man in an expensive suit most likely charging more per hour than I earn in a week, my parents turned up for the hearing. Claiming I was separating the family over a basic misunderstanding. As if Mike had stumbled and fallen into my fiancé, they painted me as the unstable one. Luckily the judge was not purchasing it. She issued the restraining order against Mike and my parents, but not without my mother crying in the courtroom and my father gazing at me like I had just committed murder. Mike's expression though, I swear, if looks could kill, I would be 6 feet under. Mike tried to get to me as we were exiting the courtroom, Reminding his attorney of the recently imposed restraining order, she stood between us. Mike merely scoffed and stated that I couldn't hide behind a piece of paper permanently. This is not over. If I said his remarks didn't knock me a bit, I would be lying. For now, at least I have some legal protection. Another dream has been the office scenario. Recall how I mentioned my family had started showing up at my workplace? That reached a head last week though. My assistant buzzed in reporting my mother was in the lobby and creating a scene while I was in a meeting with a client. She apparently brought a photo album and was trying to show my colleagues infant images of Mike and me as she sobbed over how her boys used to be so close. I left the conference and descended to the lobby, where I discovered my mother surrounded by a bunch of awkward-looking colleagues. She was midway in recounting how Mike and I used to bathe each other when young children. She rushed toward me when she saw me, chatting about a baby shower, but I stopped her. She should leave right away, I told her, or I would call the cops and have her taken off for trespassing against the restraining order. Her expression resembled what I would have slapped her with, but after everything they have gone through, I couldn't muster myself to care. Security let her out, and I had to spend the next hour damage management with my employer and colleagues. Fortunately, most of them were understanding, but I could see others were wondering what kind of drama I was bringing into the workplace. Still, the incident with Mike was where it truly veers off course. I was at the gym last Saturday working out some of my resentment on the punching bag. I was so intent on my exercise that I didn't see someone approaching me until I heard his voice. As I whirled around, Mike was grinning at me like he hadn't just broken the restraining order. He began to run his lips loud enough for others close to hear. He chuckled when I urged him to go before I phoned the police, claiming he would tell them how I had been threatening Sarah and him. I became lost at that point. My fist hooked with his jaw as I struck at him. He stammered back, then launched himself at me. Except this time, no one told me to be the larger person and let Mike win. We ended up on the floor trading punches like we were kids again, without parents to break us up. Before the gym personnel drew us apart, I made a few decent hits. I could feel my eye bulging closed while Mike's nose was bleeding. We were both screaming, seeking release and aiming at one another once more. It was only when the gym manager threatened to call the police that I snapped out of it. I got ready and headed off. Still pulsing with excitement, I answered a call from an unidentified number as I was headed home. Against better taste, I responded to it. Sarah, shouting at me about how I had cracked Mike's nose, might require surgery. I laughed. It was not against will. Her anger at me following all they had done seemed ridiculous, too much. I apologized to her for hurting her little boyfriend, the one she had been sleeping with behind my back for months. She began to cry then, continuing on about her stress, how the baby could sense her misery and how selfish I could be. I blocked the number and hung on hers. The fight produced quite a strong blowback. News had crept across our social circle like wildfire. Texts from friends and relatives, some supporting me and others calling me names for beating my poor defenseless brother, were exploding on my phone. Reaching out once more, Sarah's parents expressed their dismay in their daughter and reiterated their support of me. Though at this point I'll take anything I can get, it was a meager comfort. Nowadays, the restraining order seems inadequate. Mike has proved he is ready to break it, hence I am concerned about his future actions. The legal fallout has been a horror show. My attorney called me the day following the gym incident. Mike apparently had accused me of assault. I described what had happened. How Mike had provoked me. How he had broken the restraining order. We would fight it, my lawyer groaned, but given that I delivered the first punch, it might be an uphill struggle. We are already pressing our own charges against Mike for breaching the restraining order. Though nothing is definite, my attorney feels sure this will strengthen our case. I had to show the cops the marks on my face and knuckles and make statements to them. Having to defend myself against my own brother makes one embarrassed. Mike and I have been banned from the gym, although I can't say I blame them. It sucks. That gym was one of the only places I felt I could properly release some of my wrath. I have always been close to my cousin Amy, so she contacted me the other day. The family has been complaining a lot about her supporting me, but she is not wavering. She shared with me some of what goes on behind the scenes. My parents apparently have been telling everyone I'm experiencing some sort of mental collapse. They claim I'm just jealous and can't let go since Sarah and Mike's relationship began shortly following our breakup. While some family members are buying it, Amy notes that many others are not. Knowing that they are out there propagating lies about me while I'm trying to keep my head down and heal irritates me. Things at work have been, to put it mildly, strained. I can sense my colleagues are walking on eggshells around me following the incident with my mother in the lobby and the fight with Mike that is trending on local social media. Early this week, my manager summoned me into his office. He began by stating he valued me as an employee and that I'm going through a trying period, But then he really hit me. He believes it would be best if I took a break just till things calm down. If you would want, he continued, we can call it a personal sabbatical, paid, of course. I wanted to disagree, telling him that right now only work keeps me sane, but I could see the choice had already been taken. I agreed, thanked him for his patience, and got to work packing my office. 2 of my colleagues were gossiping about how my brother had got my fiancée pregnant as I was leaving. I departed slamming my office door louder than required, rather pleased to see them jump. Saying all of this isn't hurting me would be dishonesty. To get out of my apartment, I have started late-night lengthy rides. Sometimes I find myself wondering how the hell my life turned into such a mess when parked outside my previous apartment, the one I lived with Sarah. Amid all of this turmoil, I discovered help from an unlikely source, Sarah's younger sister Emma. Emma contacted me on social media, apologizing for her sister's behavior and lending her support. I was first dubious. What if this were some sort of trick? But after chatting with her, I found she shares my hatred of Sarah's actions. She has been sharing with me details on Sarah and Mike's life. Apparently, they have moved in together and act as though they did not simply blow up many lives to be together. Emma says Sarah has been trying to present herself as the victim in all this, sobbing to anybody who will listen about how she never meant to hurt anyone. And in what ways she and Mike are soulmates who found each other against all odds. I get ill to my stomach from it, but I appreciate Emma keeping me current. After all, information is power, even if it is knowledge I would prefer not have. Another horror has been the social media scenario. When it comes to social media, I have always been a really quiet person. But this whole incident has put me in an unwelcome public view. On a local Facebook group, someone, probably one of Mike's buddies, posted about our gym brawl. The post omitted our names, but it sufficiently detailed the circumstances to allow anyone who knows us to work it out. The section on comments became a battlefield. Some people were supporting me, claiming Mike received his just compensation. Others called me erratic and advised I should be locked up. One night after a few too many beers, I made the grave error of looking over some of the comments. I ended up hard enough tossing my phone across the room to break the screen. Since then, I have turned off most of my social media accounts. The continuous alerts and the messages from folks I haven't spoken to in years suddenly wanting all the juicy specifics of my personal life make me unable to handle it. Having all that has transpired, I have come to see I cannot continue to live in this city. Too many memories abound, too many opportunities for running across either Mike or Sarah or my parents. I've been researching moves inside my organization. Our Seattle office has a seemingly interesting opening. Though I've never loved continuous rain, at this point I would relocate to the moon if it would mean escaping all this drama. Though I have not yet made any decisions, the concept of a fresh start is growing more and more intriguing. New city, new apartment, new life. Somewhere nobody remembers me as the man whose brother knocked down his fiancée. Since the restraining order was obtained, my parents have been unusually silent. I'm waiting for the other shoe to fall so they may find some fresh approach to try to push their way back into my life. Sarah has been distributing the word of her pregnancy all around. Emma tells me she has been sharing regular updates on social media, ultrasound images, belly shots, the works, always with a caption regarding how grateful she and Mike are, how thrilled they are to start their family. Every additional bit of data feels like a fresh wound opening, the hurt just waiting to resurface when I start to heal. Right now then, is where things stand. I felt 2 weeks ago that my life could not become any more disorganized, but strangely it has. I still hurt and am angry, but I also am exhausted. Tired of justifying myself. Thus Reddit, I suppose this is more of an update than a change of direction. Not sure, a cry into the emptiness. Right now I'm not even clear about what I'm asking for. Advice? Affordability? Time machine? I could go back and never introduce Sarah to my brother. I'll attempt to keep you all informed whatever occurs going forward. More to me than you could realize is the result of your support. It's encouraging to be reminded that even if it seems as though lies and treachery rule my entire life, there are still decent individuals out there. Final update. Hey Reddit, I'm back with what I expect to be my last post on this entire fiasco after not updating for a week. First of all, I want to thank each of you for your help and guidance along this process. During the worst of my life, your comments have been a lifeline. Where therefore ought one to start? In just 7 days, a lot has transpired. I am still working to sort it all. I suppose I would begin with the most important news. I am relocating. Indeed, that's correct. I jumped in and agreed to a transfer to our Seattle headquarters. Though it was not a simple choice, I felt I needed a fresh start following all that had gone down. The choice followed last week's really difficult day. I had just returned from another meeting with my attorney regarding Mike's assault allegations when I came upon a note in my mailbox. From Sarah it was. Curiosity won me over even though I nearly threw it away without opening it. Inside was a handwritten note discussing her and Mike's great excitement about their baby and an ultrasonic image. She continued on regarding how the baby would love to have its uncle in its life and how I could find it in my heart to be pleased for them. Red caught my eye. I had grabbed my phone, unblocked Sarah, and phoned her before I knew what I was doing. She grabbed up the second ring and I let loose. I informed her exactly what I considered her, Mike, and their contented small family to be. If she believed I would ever want anything to do with that child, I told her she was insane. As far as I could tell, Mike, the baby, and she could all go to hell. Though it wasn't my best moment, it seemed like I'd at last uttered all the things I had been holding back. I realized then I had to leave this city. That same evening, I phoned my supervisor and said I wanted to move to Seattle. To be really honest, he seemed relieved. He was probably concerned about how this drama would damage the business. He guaranteed to expedite the documentation, and by the next morning it was official. 2 weeks allowed me to pack my life and go across the nation. My family and social circle soon started to buzz with word of my relocation. Normally, my parents were rather angry. Once more breaking the restraining order, they showed up at my flat unannounced trying to talk me out of it. Saying I was deserting the family, my mother was crying. Red-faced and furious with my selfish and immature behavior, my dad was ranting. I stayed quiet. I just phoned the cops and had them taken off for breaching the restraining order. My mother yelled that I would regret this, that family was everything, and I was throwing it all away as they were being let out. I just closed the door and resumed packing. Mike responded in a different way. Presumably because of ongoing legal concerns, he did not try to personally reach out to me. Instead, he posted a long piece on social media on how some people struggle to see others happy and on how he and Sarah were overcoming hate to concentrate on their new family. Clearly meant for me, it sought to present himself as the victim. Though I'll confess it stung to see how many people liked and commented in support of him, I told myself that their viewpoint doesn't count as they don't know the reality. Among the most unexpected responses was Sarah's. Following our phone talk, she contacted her sister Emma, who, should you recall, had been keeping me informed on Sarah and Mike's developments. My statements apparently struck closer than I had anticipated. Emma informed me Sarah had broken down, confessing she was afraid of the future and felt what she and Mike had done was terrible. Bless her, my cousin Amy said she could help me pack. She even informed me further about the family situation. Amy informed me that my aunt, the sister of my mother, had a major blowout with her mother, calling her out for consistently favoring Mike and driving me away. It grew really heated, with my aunt remarking that with their years of favoritism, my mom and dad were reaping what they had created. That someone is at last calling them out on their behavior makes me somewhat happy. Although the legal matter is still under flux, my attorney tells me that my relocation has no bearing on anything. Mike broke the restraining order, hence we are still charging him fees, and we are contesting the assault accusations he leveled against me. Given Mike's track record of breaking the restraining order, my attorney feels sure the judge would see through his lies. Moving across the nation should also help prove that I am not a threat to Mike, thereby helping to have his charges dropped. After this, I'm not sure whether I will publish any more updates. Starting anew means bidding farewell to the past, and as beneficial as this community has been, I believe it's time for me to distance myself from rewriting this narrative. I have to concentrate on starting my new life instead of muckering the old one. This thus seems to be my last update. Hope for me, Reddit. In Seattle, I have a completely fresh life ready for me and want to maximize it. Dad planned to marry his young girlfriend just weeks after my mom's death, threatening to kick me out. Am I the asshole for ruining his wedding? My father has always mistreated me badly. He was obviously not interested in being a dad from a very young age, but I never could find out which he disliked more, being married to my mother or father to me. Given that he treated my mother no better than he treated me, I believe he must have loathed it equally. I lost my mother only 4 weeks back. I turned 17 some months ago. It was not surprising. She had been battling lung cancer for some time and at last passed away in a hospital. 3 years ago she was diagnosed. Since then, it felt like I had been holding my breath. I believe I at last let it all go when Mom died. She was my friend, thus even now it feels quite strange to be without her around. She was most crucially the only person there to guard me from my father. Every single day in the house where I grew up, my parents would argue over something or another. They obviously did not love one another, and I really have no idea why they were married. My mother would tell me that they had loved each other at some time every time I asked her why she had married him. They would always make up, but I never could forgive my father as fast as my mother did. She had been urged to leave him several times, as occasionally he would say extremely terrible things to her during a quarrel. He would say things like how he wishes she died from her illness so he could go on with his life, and how he regretfully ever was with her and had a child with her. She just resisted when I advised her to go several times. I'm not sure why. Regarding myself, I had wanted to go from the age of 4 years old but had nowhere else to go and no other relatives either. Raised by her grandmother, who passed away while she was in college, my mother was an orphan who had lost her parents in an accident when she was small. She contacted no other family members, hence I knew nothing about my father's side of the family as he never took us to see them. He claimed not wanting us to see his family since he did not get along with them. There was no elaboration, and I asked him too, afraid. I was used to being screamed at for stuff, hence I wasn't going to paint a bullseye on myself by prying into anything like that. I had to deal with my father since, all told, my parents were the only family I had. My mother refused to go. I was heartbroken when she died, but my dad carried on as though nothing had happened. It was not shocking to me in the least since he had been acting the same way even when she was unwell. Knowing he did not love anyone, I did not expect him to be sensitive. He most likely lacked even that ability. What truly startled me though, was that my dad brought home a considerably younger woman once we were finished with the funeral and paperwork 2 weeks after my mother died. She was simply here one morning drinking coffee in our living room. My father told me she was my new mother when I plucked the bravery to ask her who she was. When he was telling me that, he apparently also had the largest smile on his face, probably his creepiest one yet. Against my will, I found myself remarking on it. Since it had only been 2 weeks since my mother died, I told him it was a little too soon to bring his girlfriend home. That brought me to a lecture from him on how this would be my stepmother in a few days and on the need of respecting her. He told me he didn't care that I had just lost my mother. I had to treat her the same way I had treated my own mother. He dropped another bombshell on me and informed me he was getting married as I was over myself with rage trying to argue with him. Ever since her diagnosis, he claimed, he had known that she would not be able to make it as she had always been delicate and frail ever since he had known her. He had thus begun searching for substitutes. That is exactly the word he used. For the past 2 years he had been with Melissa, his girlfriend. Now that my mother was at last out of the way, he told me he was planning to be married once more and ensure her death had no impact on his life at all. It at once made sense why he had been untouched by my mother's illness and death thus far. He had replaced her. I honestly just turned away from him because I was disgusted. I told him I would not be attending the wedding, and expected him to say he was good with it since, really, why would he care? Then he informed me I had to go, which caught me off guard. He informed me he could only make this look regular and acceptable to other people if I attended, so explaining why it was. He seemed to be saying that by showing up for the wedding, I would have accepted it, and that since his own daughter had not objected to this marriage, nobody else would have any cause to remark on it either. Basically, he required me to be there so it would seem less depraved, which in and of itself was really crazy. To be honest, my father seemed insane. Besides saying such strange and pointless things, he was getting married 2 weeks after his wife died without thinking about what other people would say. Not only that, the woman marrying him was only 25 at most, a few years older than I am. Her actual age is unknown, however she cannot be older than that. My dad falls in late 40s. This man, who recently lost his wife to cancer and should be in mourning right now, is instead getting married and expecting his daughter to act like this is all normal and that she supports it. It is eerie enough. He definitely belongs in a straitjacket in a padded room. It's a complete formula for catastrophe. I told him there was no way I could be at this wedding when he informed me he was marrying Melissa. He was free to become offended at that as desired. Then he informed me he would not only be offended but also kicked me out should I miss a meeting. He would also ensure that I never got access to the college fund my mother and he had been saving for me ever since my birth. Since, as he had stated, my mom's money had gone into the education fund as well as his, so I considered it to be essentially unjust. Although I think I was entitled to it, sadly I couldn't make him turn over the money to me as it is not required by law. There were no records to support it, hence it was not as if he had set it aside especially for that purpose. Basically, I would be tossed out and would not have any chances of attending college either if I skipped that wedding. On one hand, I did not want to seem like I was part of this or that I was encouraging this craziness in any kind whatsoever, thus I was in a quite tough situation. However, I also had to look out for myself as I had a few months left before I left for college and I couldn't afford to lose money since I had none of my own. My mother's will takes some time to process, hence I would only obtain the inheritance only then. For now, It seemed as though my only choice was to show up for the wedding and present myself as helping my father. Last week I was informed about the wedding, but I just couldn't get myself to welcome it. I thus resolved that I had to go all out to prevent this from occurring. Or at least try to intervene. I told my father I would be at the wedding, but then I started searching for something, anything, to throw off the proceedings since I just couldn't bring myself to let this happen. I just wanted something. I really had no idea what I was looking for. When my father left his laptop alone, I got quite lucky, miraculously lucky. A few days back, he and Melissa went out to celebrate their marriage by dinner. I was alone at home. Leaving his laptop on the coffee table, my dad had since it was locked. I expected nothing when I opened it, therefore I just tried to guess the password. Fortunately, I got everything just perfect. Melissa's name came first, then his own birthday, which was strangely startling. Still, once I arrived, I could hardly believe it. I first found nothing when I started browsing his social media. Then I saw he had 2 Facebook profiles, and I chose to review the second one, which I had not seen before. Surprising me was his hidden account set up for his side of the family. He had been telling my mother and me he did not get along with his family, but here he was on his other page hanging out with individuals we had never seen before who seemed to be certainly linked to him. As I searched, additional pictures from years past turned up. He obviously has been in contact with his family all along. He had simply been fooling us. I then chose to review his communications on that account and discovered that he had been in contact with his parents for really a lengthy period. I guess he also carried another phone. From the start, he had been living essentially 2 lives, and nobody knew. Although my mother had known about some of this, she had never shared anything with me. Neither had my mother. I was rather sure his family knew nothing about me whatsoever. Following his talks with his father on his account, I discovered that his father believed he was living away from home for business only, nothing else. He had a full family here, little knowing of it. I snapped brief pictures of those conversations and turned to my own phone to talk to my grandfather. Given all of this was so absurd, I was really anxious about whether he would even believe me. I could hardly believe it myself. Still, I went to my room and signed in using my own Facebook account. I got in touch with the profile I saw on my dad's page. As I had predicted, there had been no mutual friends. So I had never been able to locate him. I had never been able to track these people as I hadn't even known my grandfather's true name for all these years. Having his account now, I messaged him straight away and tried to rapidly explain everything. This was an emergency, hence I provided him my phone number and advised him to get in touch as soon as he could. I included additional pictures of the screenshots I'd taken, outlining how I had tracked his profile. I also sent some pictures of me with my parents so he would know this was not a hoax directed on him. After not hearing anything for the following 12 hours, I nearly gave up hope. Maybe he had chosen not to react since he felt someone was pulling a practical joke on him. But I eventually got a call from my granddad when Dad was at work. I was simply lucky that he had phoned me before that and had not mentioned this to my father. Anyway, I answered my phone and told him what was happening as soon as he called. For the past 17 years, he informed me, he had been made to believe that my father was working elsewhere, that is, away from Iowa, where he was originally from. Apparently, my dad had a separate house and everything here, which is where my grandparents had lived whenever they paid him visits. He had also visited his son several times. About none of this, they had the least of knowledge. They had spent the last 12 hours trying to get over the shock of it all. At first this all seemed to them as a joke, but they came to recognize it was real when they viewed my mother in the family pictures I had emailed. Apparently, my father had told his parents he had broken up with my mother, so he had never told them about his marriage and the family he had. They disapproved of her 18 years ago, when my parents first began dating. He had informed my grandparents he had dumped her as they were quite clear they did not want my father to marry my mother. For the past 2 decades, it was the fiction he had been selling. Now he had at last been caught. My grandparents had not wanted my father to wed my mother for really serious reasons. It was because they accused my mother of being a gold digger and she had reportedly been trying to cheat on him. This was due in part to the first time my father had brought my mother home to see his parents. She had instantly targeted his older brother, a surgeon who clearly made more than my father. My uncle's refusal to keep his lips shut over something so significant led my grandparents to learn about it. My father had been asked to split up with my mother, but he had turned down their proposal. I believe it was because of me since, based on my calculations, my mother most likely already was pregnant by then. My parents were given an ultimatum. Either they would cut him off from their life or he would split up with my mother. They understood she was only with him for the money, hence cutting him off would drive my mother to leave him. Eventually, my dad told them he had split things off with my mother, although obviously he had not, as they remained together. And this is the reason I'm here. If my mother had really done such things, I wonder why they stayed together. This fundamentally altered my view of both my parents. Once I knew these things though, I told my grandparents how badly I was being treated and that I had nowhere else to rely on. But I was depending on them now that I knew they existed and wasn't as alone as I had first thought. I still would understand if they turned away from me. Thank goodness they decided to assist me. I was able to stop the wedding from taking place. Like his parents, I returned to my father's house also. 2 days ago they flew down here. Yesterday, I managed to slip them into the wedding. All of a sudden, we were honored guests. Our backyard was the venue for the wedding as just a small number of guests were expected to attend. It was supposed to be a modest and private ceremony. Only my father's colleagues and boss, a couple of his acquaintances, and that was it. He had obviously not invited his family. They had not even received invitations to his first marriage. But I arranged for their attendance at the second. I emailed my grandparents and informed them it was finally time for them to show up as I wanted to halt everything before the vows were taken. Melissa had walked down the aisle and everything. I slipped out right before the vows, and then it was my turn to walk down the aisle with my grandparents for the theatrical purposes of it all. My father's face dropped and Melissa seemed fairly perplexed as soon as he saw me walking down the aisle with his parents. Once I drew close to him, I declared that his parents now knew the truth, that I had at last exposed all his falsehoods. He could bid farewell to his inheritance since all was now coming to me rather than to him. Since I already had a place to live, people looking after me, and also my college fund, I no longer needed him either. Knowing he was a liar, I did not want to be with him, so he could do anything he pleased. I then left with my grandparents, and since then we have been staying in a hotel getting ready for our trip back. Since I haven't known these folks, my grandparents need a lot of catching up. Likewise, there is plenty to discuss about my parents. We haven't returned yet mainly because this morning my father finally got in touch with my grandfather and informed him that what he did was simply not proper. He had supposedly never allowed his parents to be happy and accused them of trying to control him all his life. Saying I just couldn't stand to see him happy with anyone else, he also accused me of trying to ruin him by showing up at the wedding like that. Since Melissa is now avoiding him and the wedding was clearly called off yesterday itself, immediately after we left, he is blaming all of us. I am therefore good with showing up for his second wedding with his parents and exposing him for lying. Update 1, the wedding call-off was 4 days ago. I decided not to answer my father. He does not deserve it. My grandparents agreed as well. He knows where to find us should he wish to communicate with us. We still occupy the hotel. We have provided him with the specifics. If he would want to talk with us, he could come see us and then we could have a personal conversation. But the kind of conversation we wish to conduct over the phone or via text is not this one. He still hasn't turned up yet, and just 3 days remain before I return to Iowa with my grandparents. They have a farm there, they're really wealthy, and I will be taken care of considerably better than I was here. They assured me that they would see to it that I could attend the college of my choosing and that I wouldn't have to suffer following this. Since we first met, my grandparents have been almost pampering me. I believe they are attempting to make up for lost time, which is rather lovely of them. Though they seem to love me a lot, they loathe my mother and subsequently my father as well. Update 2. My grandparents and I are meant to be leaving in 2 days. My father decided this morning to at last pay us a visit and speak with us. When they contacted me this morning, I was really taken aback to see him in my grandparents' hotel room, but I immediately recovered and vowed not to talk to him the whole time until he apologized. Clearly though, given someone like him, that is too much to demand. He was here just to discuss how unfair it was that my grandparents had opted to cut him off from their life and hand me all the wealth instead. He claimed to have already lost Melissa, my mother, and his wife as well. Things were already really terrible for him since I also wanted no more contact with him. To top it all, his close friends and colleagues, all the attendees of the wedding, are now acting strange with him. What transpired at the wedding has damaged his reputation. Hence he is thinking of leaving his employment. He believes he cannot operate in such a hostile environment. To put it plainly, he had kind of lost all he owned till a few days earlier. Then we showed him at the wedding, exposed him and wrecked everything for him. The least we could do was let him inherit, something he had been striving for years. Otherwise, he would not have lied to all of us for so long in the first place. He started lying since he merely wanted everyone to be happy. After marrying my mother, he said he had intended to tell his parents the truth, but as time went on it became more embarrassing to bring up. He had to keep up his lies and arrange a complex double life. Since everyone, including his parents, was against his happiness, he asserted he was the victim. Now, knowing I would be taken care of anyway, He came here to claim what he felt due to him, the legacy. From the start, he had been hoping and fighting for this. It would be unfair to deny it for such a minor cause. The way he was behaving as the victim infuriated me already. I lost it totally when he declared he deserved the fortune. I screamed out at him before my grandparents could say anything, "If you really deserve that inheritance, then I also deserve to be treated like a human being for the past 17 years. He had never shown me any love, affection, or even the smallest of respect. 2 weeks after I lost my mother, he had genuinely threatened to kick me out and use my education fund for his own expenses if I opposed his marriage to his young girlfriend. It was only fair his parents took away anything he thought he deserved since he could not give me anything I deserved. My behavior startled him since I had never before stood up to him like that. But now, thanks to my grandparents, I no longer felt terrified of him. Usually when I was younger, this worked to shut me down. He tried to glare at me, but this time I wasn't going to be silent. Earlier, I would do that since I knew my mother wouldn't leave, probably for the same reason my father didn't cut off relations with his parents: money. Which upon her death, was ultimately futile. Her only advantage from living with him was passing away at a reputable hospital. My dad tried to yell at me when I refused to be quiet, but my grandparents told him it wasn't going to work anymore. My grandparents threatened to call security on him, thus after some conflict he had to leave. He wouldn't get anything unless he owned and accepted his mistakes. They were very plain. It would take a lot even then for them to pardon him. Had I chosen to keep the inheritance for myself, he would not have anything at all. Promising he would make sure we pay the price for what we had done, he fled like a toddler having a tantrum. What he believed he was doing is unknown to me. Though he most likely thought his actions would frighten us, it did not. It strengthened our conviction that, by not forgiving him, we were doing morally. He was not even remorseful, hence nothing could be forgiven. It gives me great pleasure to be leaving with my grandparents in a few days. I simply want to escape all of this. Although I will miss my buddies, it makes no difference now. Fall brings my trip to college. I just finished all of this. I graduated from high school. Update 3. Hi. So I left home 1 year ago. I haven't blogged anything for the previous few months since I have been really busy with college. I had essentially forgotten about it too. Following that battle with my dad in the hotel room, which I discussed in my last update, my grandparents and I headed off. We hardly spoke with my dad over the following 2 weeks, but I did run across a lot of members of his side of the family. I believe this family is the one I deserved all along. They all love me. Though she was too self-serving, my mother most likely attempted to love me. Ultimately, it damaged me more than it did her. My uncle assured me he would pay for my college tuition, therefore relieving me of any concern about it. That has been a great comfort. Though they had hardly known me for a few weeks, these folks had already resolved to show me all the affection I had been lacking for the past 17 years. For that, I am most grateful. A few months after moving in with my grandparents, I had to go to college, so I spent little time with them. My college is near where they reside, so on weekends I get to see them. There are no grievances regarding that. Not to apologize, but rather to remind me that I wrecked him and should feel bad. My father has tried to get in touch with me multiple times. He continues asking me to check on my grandparents to see whether he fits the inheritance. He emails and chats from several accounts but doesn't understand that being defensive won't support his cause. A sincere and honest apology would be the only thing that could assist him, yet at this time, it is too little, too late. I will simply ignore him. It is not worth it to reply to him. I lack the time or will to indulge his illusions. At last, I have the family I am due and am content with them. Right now, I'm loving my college life. So I will concentrate on the advantages in my life and attempt to forget about the past. I simply want to keep on improving personally. Karen claims to be the owner's wife in my parents' restaurant and ends up embarrassing herself. I am 18 years old. We offer snacks, cakes, candies, and several fast items in the small restaurant my parents run. Let us just refer to it as Joe's. It was named after my grandparents. Yes, I do pay. Normally, I hang out there with friends to have something whenever I have free time, and this helps them to pay as well. Working at Joe's pays me, especially on the weekends as it gets really busy. I pick orders and assist others with service. We do indeed have staff members. Along with paying me for the hours I work, my dad lets me keep the tip money clients leave after dining. Few of the frequent patrons are aware that my parents, the proprietors, also work there. I am the son of the owner. People commonly confuse them, nevertheless, for employees. One weekend, a woman, probably in her 30s or 40s, entered the restaurant with her bratty child, who appeared to be roughly 13 years old. Given it was the weekend, the place was somewhat packed. She was advised to take a seat on one of the waiting seats. About 20 minutes later, she sat down at a ready table. I went to get her order. I can't precisely recall what she ordered, perhaps a sandwich or something. I handed the order to the kitchen and stood next to the register monitoring whether anyone needed anything. Her bratty child was running around the restaurant, yelling, running over people, treading on their feet, even touching their food. Naturally, the mother seemed unconcerned and preoccupied on her phone. This infuriated me much, hence I grabbed the child by his hand and angrily instructed him not to run in such a strong manner that he started crying and ran back to his mother. Fuming, the mother stripped across to me. The discussion proceeded as follows. "How dare you touch my child?" the entitled mother says. "Me? He was flitting about upsetting other individuals. Surely you noticed he was handling their food." "Well, he's a child," says the entitled mother. "He is free to do as he likes." "Me? Well, yeah, but under my supervision." "Do you even know who I am?" the entitled mother asked. Thinking, asterisk. Here we go again. Knowing what was about to happen, I chose to participate, asterisk. "Me? No ma'am, I'm not." Entitled mother. "Well, then you ought to know. I am the owner's wife. You're getting fired, so you made a big mistake and I will make sure your face won't be seen here again." I started to find amusement at this stage. I assumed she would say she was a friend or sister of the owner, but she opted for asterisk wife asterisk, hence now I could have some fun. "Me? Ma'am, I doubt you even know his." She served me. "His name is insert my dad's name here," says entitled mother. She knew my dad's name, which startled me since only a small number of people knew that fact. "Me? Ma'am, please don't get me fired. I'm so sorry I was nasty to your son. I just have this job." Entitled mother. "You should have considered that before you touched my son." "Me? But ma'am, he was frustrating." She once more cut me off. Title mother. "Shut up." She marched across to the cashier and insisted on talking to the manager. Coming out, my dad asked her what was happening. Entitled mother. "Your staff member has been buzzling my son. I want him to be let go right now." I'm sorry for the inconvenience, but I can't just fire him without reason," my dad answered after staring at me then back at her. "Do you even know who you're talking to?" Entitled mother asks. "The owner of Joe's is married to me, hence I find this staff unacceptable." My dad smiled the most of all. Entitled mother. "Why are you laughing?" "I am sincere. Dad, I apologize for any trouble once more. Are you looking for a refund?" The entitled mother entered complete fury mode and exclaimed, "You know what? I'm grumbling about you and your company on my phone to my husband. We'll have you sacked right now." We posted it on a board outside for home delivery orders, hence she picked my dad's phone number. She gave that number a call. My dad's phone rang. Shock rocked Karen, the entitled mother. Taking up the phone he said, "Hello, this is Joe's owner, how could I assist you?" As if all the blood drained from Karen, her face turned from red to absolutely white. "Yes, I am the owner and manager of Joe's and you are not at all my wife," he said. "And my son is the employee you wish sacked." She stared at me, and my laughter started to flow uncontrolled. Her order came ready just then, but by then she was already ashamed enough. Her child was wailing all through the backdrop. We still giggle about her dragging him out by the arm, not following the instructions, and without even taking the order. Man, I find it hard to understand how long OP let this continue before saying anything. He actually had not really needed to say anything at all. She called the number outside and spoke with the owner personally, hence the only reason the entitled mother discovered he was the son of the owner and she was not the wife. She chose the wife role straight ahead instead of other possibilities like OP considered, such as becoming the sister or friend of the owner. She simply asserted, rather boldly, to be the wife of the proprietor. I wouldn't have been able to resist shouting something like, "Mom, you finally came home," remarked one of the funniest remarks, then tried hugging her while faking tears of joy. Following up, someone remarked, "That would be awesome and hilarious. And I have a younger brother as well. Were you expecting Dad when you left? Is he a half-brother?" Better still, the larger the scene is. People begin by pulling out their phones and filming the entire event. Tell me what you would score this entitlement level 1 out of 10 and down below in the comments. Am I the asshole for exposing my dad's girlfriend after she tried to kick me out and faked a pregnancy? I'm M20, and I was a former foster kid. I was never adopted before I aged out, but I was placed with Joe when I was 10, and we were long-term matched by the time I was 14. Joe's the only real family I've ever had, and I consider him my dad. Even though the whole adoption thing never happened. When I first moved in with Joe, he was married, but his wife passed away suddenly when I was 12. That was tough on both of us, but we managed to get through it together. Now, Joe's been dating his current girlfriend, Sarah, for about 2 years. She didn't come over much, and when she did it was pretty brief. But 3 weeks ago she moved into our house because she lost her job and couldn't afford rent anymore. I don't know if she was always like this or if moving in has brought out a different side of her, but Sarah's been acting really strange. Whenever Joe isn't around, she completely ignores me, won't even look at me when I speak, won't answer questions, nothing. At first I thought it might be some kind of anxiety thing. But now it started getting worse. For example, when Joe's at work and I'm in the lounge watching a movie, she'll come in and start blasting TikTok on her phone or playing music, totally disregarding the fact that I'm there. When I ask her to turn it down, she just flat out ignores me. And it's not just the ignoring that's the problem. She started saying some pretty nasty stuff about me too. She FaceTimed her friend while I was in the room and talked about how lazy I am and how I don't contribute anything to the household. Yesterday, I was sitting on the sofa watching the new Deadpool movie when she came and sat across from me, FaceTiming her friend again. She started talking about how she and Joe are trying for a baby and how excited they are because neither of them have had children before. Those exact words. It felt like a slap in the face. I know Joe wouldn't have said something like that because he considers me his son. So either she's making it up, or I don't even know what. I haven't told Joe about the things she's been saying to her friend because I don't want to mess up his first real relationship since his wife died. But this situation is seriously eating me up inside. I mentioned the situation to a few people and a couple of them suggested that I secretly record her behavior when Joe isn't around so that he can see what's really going on. It seemed like a good idea at first, but when I talked to one of my close friends about it, he said that secretly recording her could just make things worse. He thinks it might make Joe feel like I'm going behind his back and could cause even more tension, especially if Sarah twists it to make me look bad. So, WABTA if I secretly recorded her to show Joe what she's really like, or should I just avoid it altogether? I don't want to seem like I'm trying to sabotage his relationship, but I'm not sure what else to do. Relevant comments. November 8485. You need to talk to Joe. You can record it in case he doesn't believe you, but you need to talk to him ASAP. And you might also have to work on your exit plan in case it backfires, which it can. People in love do strange things at times. NTA. OOP. I don't think Joe would ever kick me out, but you're right, I should have a backup plan just in case. Call 20. So many parents kick out kids when a new relationship forms and the kid doesn't get on with the new spouse. Don't be blindsided by something that is a huge possibility. You're an adult. Joe's GF could have the very easy argument that you're an adult and need to move out so they can work on furthering their relationship. Having a child together would absolutely be a reason he would side with her. NTA, out of curiosity, you have only explained that you lounge and watch TV. Are you contributing to the household in any way? If Joe's GF is contributing to the household, I can see why she would have an issue floating with you. OOP, well, I'm still at college. Americans would call this high school. But it's summer. As a foster care leaver, Joe is paid £300 per week by the government to support me until I finish. This will carry on until I finish university or until I'm 25, whichever is first. I also get universal credit which I use for most of my expenses. OOP goes on to state, high school usually ends at 18 here also, but I've had to redo some learning that I missed. Huge_lime 826 Get your ass off the couch and contribute to the home. Seems to me you are too stupid to realize that he will pick his girlfriend bedmate over a 20-year-old taking up space and pissing off his hot girlfriend. You don't realize it, but unless you start contributing your days are numbered. So you're off school for the summer. Why don't you have a job to go to every day instead of sitting your ass on the couch? OP, who hurt you? Huge_lime 826 Nobody hurt me. But I did have enough common sense to get my ass off the couch and not play video games as a 20-year-old and then bitch about somebody who actually is contributing to the household. If he doesn't believe the girlfriend is more important to Joe than he has blinders on. Just wait until she has a baby. He needs to wake up and get his ass off the couch and contribute to the family. 20 years old is not a time to be sitting on the couch playing video games to get a job. Automatic_mirror_825. It's time to fly out of the nest, find a job, and/or college. Build your own life. You are an adult, young, male, with lots of opportunities. Sorry_I_guess responding to automatic_mirror_825. This young man didn't have a stable home until he was 10. He went through a traumatic childhood, and his life's trajectory is not the same as most people's. so developmentally it may be important for him to take a little longer to feel safe and confident. Hell, he's still finishing his secondary education due to those complications. And you have literally no idea what opportunities he does or doesn't have. As long as his father is happy to have him there, who are you to tell him he needs to leave home? What a shitty, presumptuous thing to say. Silent Prune 8103. Going to school isn't contributing to the household. Doing chores, taking out the trash, preparing dinner, doing laundry, sweeping the floors, vacuuming, doing repairs around the house. Contributing to the sustainment of your family's home and health of it so it doesn't burden others. That's my responsibility. If she finds herself or Joe doing all of this, then I would be annoyed as well. You're an adult. As an adult you should be contributing without being told the responsibilities of maintaining the home. I would say getting a job as well at your age. Many folks go to school and have a part-time job, but if that's not the case you can help around the house. I guarantee if you're doing those things, Joe and possibly her will have a different positive opinion of you. Update. I decided to talk to Joe directly instead of secretly recording Sarah. I thought it would be more mature, sensible, and non-confrontational to handle things face to face. My mindset was that if he didn't take it seriously, then I'd consider recording to show him what was really going on. When Joe got home from work, I asked him to talk privately in my room. He seemed a bit confused at first, but I made it clear that I wasn't trying to sabotage his relationship. I just needed to tell him that some things Sarah was doing were making me uncomfortable. I reminded him about how she ignores me and mentioned how she plays videos while I'm watching TV, but when I told him she said that he didn't have any children and that they were trying for a baby, he looked really upset. It felt a bit awkward, but Joe called Sarah into the room to talk with us. He asked her if what I said was true and she immediately denied it. You could see from her body language that she was lying. I'm not sure if she just never expected me to say anything about how she's been treating me or what. Joe firmly told her that this is my house, not hers, and that while she's a guest here, she can't be disrespecting me. Things got a little heated, and in the end, she apologized to me, though it was through gritted teeth. I accepted the apology, even though I'm not sure it was genuine. After that, Joe asked if I was still comfortable with her staying with us. I said I was because I didn't want to break them up. I just wanted to tell him what was happening. However, she decided to stay at her friend's house for the night, which made the situation feel even more tense. I can tell Joe is really upset now, and I feel super guilty for making him feel this way. He insists it's not my fault and we ended up having kebabs for tea, but even so I can't shake the feeling that I've caused a huge fight between them. Joe went to bed early, and now I'm stuck feeling bad about the whole situation. I just hope that whatever happens next, things will settle down. Thank you everyone. Update 2. So, about a month ago, things seemed to be getting better, at least on the surface. Joe and Sarah got back together, and I gave them my blessing because Joe really wanted it to work. Sarah even moved back into the house, and she was actually being decent to me, which was a change. But honestly, I always felt like she was just putting on an act. I had this nagging feeling that she still didn't like me and was only being nice because her other option was to be homeless. It all went downhill really fast though. Less than a week after moving back in, Sarah announced that she was pregnant with Joe's baby. And that's when the real chaos started. She dropped this ultimatum on Joe. Either I move out, or she'd break up with him and make it impossible for him to be involved with the baby. Joe was torn because he didn't want her or the baby to be homeless, but he also made it clear that I wasn't going anywhere. I'm his family, and he wouldn't kick me out for anything. So Joe told Sarah that they'd have to break up for good after she gave him the ultimatum. He even kicked her out again. That's when things got even crazier. Sarah started messaging Joe, saying she was going to get an abortion because she couldn't afford to be pregnant. Joe, being the good guy he is, offered to send her money and even pay for her rent so she wouldn't be homeless, but she kept playing games. Anyway, I was borrowing Joe's iPad one day and I saw that Sarah's iMessage was still linked to it. I accidentally stumbled across her messages to a friend where she admitted she wasn't pregnant at all. She was just lying to get money from Joe and had this whole plan to drag him along for months before pretending to get an abortion. She even said she was going to make Joe's life miserable because he kicked her out. I felt sick to my stomach reading those messages. I took a screen recording of the entire chat, including the phone numbers and everything so she couldn't deny it or say that it was faked. When I showed Joe, he was completely heartbroken. He's stopped sending her money, but now he's unsure about what to do next. He's even thinking of reporting her to the police for fraud. But part of him just wants to cut her out of his life completely and move on. I've never seen Joe this hurt, and I feel so guilty because I know all of this is stressing him out. I'm still in shock over how horrible Sarah turned out to be. Even with everything that's happened before, I never thought she'd do something this low. Now, we're just trying to figure out how to move forward from all of this. Karen yells at me in Walmart over apple juice and demands both bottles. My mother had to visit Walmart a few days ago to pick up a prescription and some food. She detests Walmart, hence we usually attempt to move quickly. My brother and I went to hunt the few things we needed as she stood in line for the prescription. We arrived at the grocery store and got to work shopping. There were just 2 gallons of apple juice left when we at last arrived at the beverages section. As I went to pick them, a woman walked up and watched me grab them. Turning back, I asked her whether she was likewise searching for apple juice. She agreed, thus I gave her one. We would take the other. Things started to get fast. She wanted them, hence she instructed me to give her both of them. I reminded her once more that I would give her one. We would retain the other. She started asking that I give her both as she wasn't satisfied with this. I told her no flat out. Since my brother only wanted apple juice and is not good with conflict, he was not saying anything. "Ma'am, do you want this one or not?" I asked. "Just give me both," Karen said. "How difficult should one find that to grasp? I want both of them." Looking nervous, my brother interrupted her as she was beginning to create a scene and said, "Look, we're just trying to be nice." Karen jerked back. "I don't care, just show me these, you are throwing away my time." I eventually grew bored with the debate and out of spite filled our cart with both of the apple juices. I spun around and pointed for my brother to follow. She started screaming, but we proceeded toward the front. Really, it was the dumbest thing ever. Arriving first, the OP and his brother might have readily snatched both apple juice bottles without saying anything. Rather, they volunteered to give the woman one, and she turned straight forward and started screaming at them. She ended up obtaining 100% of nothing while wanting exactly 100% of the apple juice. Though it sounds like they were able to just walk away without any more problems, I find it surprising that Karen did not end up running after OP and his brother to do something further. Tell me what you would score this one, 1 out of 10, down here for the entitlement degree. An entitled parent seeks Disney World's college refund policy. Understanding the rest of the story depends on knowing all this material. Having only been here slightly over 2 months, I work at a financial aid office for a small private university. Because I have to learn topics about the financial aid application process I never would have believed I would need to know, including how FAFSA forms are handled, my work is difficult. Students must complete the FAFSA, a crucial document to find out how much money they are qualified for to pay for college. Many times, this means students with scholarships, grants, or loans could receive a return check. The amount the student qualifies for and the amount the school deducts for tuition, classes, lodging, board, and other expenditures will determine how these checks turn out. Students occasionally will obtain thousands of dollars back off. Be sure not to discuss how you intend to utilize a refund outside of class criteria for anyone who intends to obtain one, since it is policy to refuse to distribute money if they are knowingly used for items outside of school necessities. Once more, this helps one to grasp the narrative. Now, on to the narrative. Though I work as a simple office assistant, my position as a financial aid assistant is one of knowledge of a financial aid counselor. Yesterday, a young woman and her father entered the office. "Where's the person that's holding my kid's money hostage?" the man asked before I could welcome them. This man was plainly angry and bigger than me, so I got scared. Just from the intensity of his voice, I wanted to cry. "Sir, I can see if anyone's available to talk," I said, and he started yelling at me about how horrible the university was and how dare they keep his daughter's money like this. We are all women in our little office with my boss, the Director of Financial Aid, DFA, Assistant Director AD, and Student Assistant. Turning to the open doorway, I found the Assistant Director looking unconcerned. "I can discuss her money with you and your daughter," she replied. Side note, since we have no control on how it's distributed, first call the billing department, not the financial aid office, if you're seeking a refund. I heard everything discussed since the entitled dad and the girl entered the office left the door open. Had I been let to document events, for privacy concerns I wasn't, I would have noted this conversation. "So how can I help you?" the assistant director asked. "What is happening?" The entitled dad added, "The refund for my kid was meant to arrive by the end of the week, Wednesday here, and her account does not show it." "Sir, please calm down," the assistant director said. Ignoring her, the dad said, "No, we utilize her money for our trip, hence she needs it." The daughter piped in, "Dad, I'm not going on a trip." The dad said, "You are indeed. Remember, we are heading to Disney World." Knowing this, the assistant director remarked, "So you're using your refund to pay for a trip outside of school?" Saying, "No, I'm not," the daughter objected. But the dad cut her off, declaring, "Yes, she is. We now need it since she pledged to pay the deposit with that money. Sir, I must tell you that I cannot let this money be released as you have just told me your daughter will be using them for things outside of school. Please do not modify it. The dad said, What? She can spend her money any way she wants and do anything with it. The assistant director clarified. You only have this money for purchases connected to schools. Using it otherwise is regarded as fraud, a wrong use of money. OP explains here. You should never notify the financial aid office of your vacation plans and act like a jerk. You can utilize your return money any way you like. Most financial aid recipients have no particular interest in how you use your refund generally. I was still at my desk, trying to seem as though I was not hearing this, but this man went crazy. I swear I picked up more foul words from him in that one instant than I have in 27 years. Though she wouldn't be getting her money, the daughter was also unhappy. I dropped my head as they left the building. Not too long afterward, I got up to visit my assistant director. Hey, are you okay? I begged. She nodded, however she obviously needed some alone time. I don't blame her, that guy was really scary and I doubt we will hear from him very soon either. Man, if they hadn't obviously declared they would be using the money for Disneyland, it sounds like they could have really been able to help them. The fact that they intended to pay for the trip for everyone else using the daughter's money seems also strange. I sensed that the choice was made for her. Still, it was quite a poor decision for the dad to freely admit to utilizing the funds for Disneyland. Why would you even say it even if it wasn't against policy? Whichever the money is for, what difference counts? In this instance, it allowed the assistant director a simple way out from underhandling the matter entirely. Though the assistant director explicitly addressed it as a possibility, they believed the dad might keep returning but could also be terrified of anything involving fraud. That's really significant. Either way, grade this one, 1 out of 10, down below and tell me what you would do if you were in this position. Sister-in-law secretly DNA tested my adopted daughter and accused me of raising an affair baby, so I laughed in her face. Original post, August 29, 2024. When you weigh 30 m, have a daughter who's 6. I am not biologically related to her at all. There is no blood relation between us. I was friends with her mother for most of my childhood. We were never involved romantically and were always just friends. She had her daughter at 23 with her 25-year-old husband. When my daughter was a newborn, about 3 months technically, both her mother and father were killed. I won't go into too much detail for privacy reasons, but it was a workplace shooting. My friend and her husband had worked in the same building and were both killed. Both my friend and her husband had grown up with less than ideal families and didn't have any siblings, so there wasn't any next of kin for their daughter to go to. However, because I was close with them, I was able to adopt her. Even though I had been iffy about the idea of kids, I didn't want their daughter to grow up in foster care or around people who didn't have a connection to her bio parents, so I stepped in. My parents and siblings know that my daughter is not my actual daughter biologically speaking. My daughter, I'll call Lily for the post, also knows that she's adopted. I never really hid the fact that she was adopted. She knows her parents are dead and were killed by a bad man, but I'm saving the details for when she's older. Lily does not look like me at all. She looks exactly like her mother and biological dad. Most people assume that I'm her bio dad and that she just took after her mom. I don't ever really correct this when and if people assume this because it just seems unnecessary. My brother has been with his fiancée for about 2 years now. A few weeks ago we were all meeting up at my parents' house and my SIL saw an old picture of me, my friend and her husband. She pointed to my friend and asked who she was, and I explained that it was Lily's mother. SIL got quiet and stood in front of the picture for a while. I didn't think much of it. To clarify, she knows my friend died, but I guess didn't know that she had been married, or that Lily is not my bio daughter. I suppose she assumed my daughter was mine and my friend's biological daughter. My SIL got a DNA test done on my daughter behind my back. She used my brother's DNA for the test, and when it came back that they weren't related, she knew that meant me and Lily weren't related. She came up to me with the results and waved them in my face, saying that I was taking care of a dead woman's affair baby. She said this to me in front of my daughter. I just stared at her for a while before bursting out laughing at this. I told her I knew Lily wasn't my biological daughter, and that this thing called adoption exists. Her face went red and she stormed off. My brother is mad. I embarrassed his fiancée, but I said she embarrassed herself by DNA testing a kid that isn't hers and then parading the results up to me. What did she want me to do? What was her goal with this? Did she want me to break down and abandon my daughter? My brother said she thought she was doing the right thing and called me an asshole. I don't feel like the asshole, especially considering my SIL was the one who stuck her nose where it didn't belong. I'm asking for Reddit opinions, mostly just for validation. So was I the asshole? AITA has no consensus bot. OOP was NTA. Did the brother's fiancé assume OOP was married to the deceased friend? OOP. I can see how she assumed that we were together. In the picture I had my arm around her shoulders. This was before my friend was married to her husband. At the time that picture was taken they were just friends. Commenter, I think you're a hero. I'm proud of you. If anything ever happens to me I know my daughter will be so loved and cared for and raised in a loving household. I hope somehow your friend and Lily's daddy are resting peacefully knowing she's got a papa that loves her. I'm going back to cutting onions now. OP, I appreciate that, a lot. I'm doing my best to raise Lily with the values and beliefs her mother and bio dad had and wanted to raise her with, even if some of them differ a bit from my own. Does OOP know what kind of DNA test Sil took for his daughter? OOP, I believe they were doing one of those home DNA kits, though I don't know what company they did it through. Commenter, NTA. She wanted to stir some shit up, that's a hell of a lot of effort to help. Also I'd be pissed about how she got Lily's DNA to do this. It didn't go the way she thought it would so she got mad. Your brother is just trying to side with his soon-to-be wife. Update, August 31st, 2024. TLDR spoiler. My brother thought I had been having an affair with Lily's mom and thought I was Lily's bio dad. He tricked Sil into believing that I was in a relationship with Lily's mom and was Lily's bio dad. Sil then saw the picture of Lily's mom and her husband, and assumed Lily was an affair child between the two of them and was being led on to believe that I was Lily's bio dad. My Sil ended up coming to my house and apologizing, as well as telling me the full story. My brother put her up to the DNA test. When I first adopted Lily, my brother for some reason believed that Lily was my bio daughter. He thought that me and Lily's mom were together and just weren't telling anyone. He believes that when she got pregnant, Lily's mom told me that Lily was mine and that she was going to just say that it was her husband's, and I went along with it because I didn't really want kids. SIL was under the impression I believed I was Lily's bio dad. She saw the picture of Lily's mom and I, and after asking for clarification on who she was, assumed we were together in it, and then got suspicious when she saw that the other guy in the picture, Lily's actual bio dad, looked a lot like Lily. I also want to clarify, I didn't tell her that Lily's bio dad was in the picture because she had specifically pointed to Lily's mom, and I assumed she knew that Lily was adopted. I didn't know my brother had been telling her lies for nearly 2 years. She got the DNA test out of her own suspicions, and my brother helped her with it because he thought it would reveal that I was actually Lily's bio dad. He manipulated her into thinking that it would clear the air of suspicion, when really he was just trying to prove that I was really Lily's bio dad and lying about the reasons for adoption. Well, of course the results proved I wasn't Lily's bio dad and that my brother was wrong. My brother felt too embarrassed to confess to his fiancée that he had lied about the circumstances, which is why Sil confronted me with the results. My SIL also apologized for showing me the results in front of my daughter. She told me that her mom had an affair and cheated on her father, got pregnant with another man's kid, and had let her father believe the kid was his. Her father was devastated by this when he found out, and she grew very resentful of women who do that to their spouses. She had wanted to sit me down and talk to me about it without my daughter, but when she saw me with my daughter she got angry thinking I was being led on to believe I was raising my daughter when I was actually raising another man's kid, and she ended up exploding and immediately waved the results in my face. My SIL does feel very guilty, and she's angry at my brother for lying to her. I'm not angry at her for doing the test, because she thought she was doing the right thing. I also forgave her for the way she told me about the results, because clearly affairs are a sensitive subject for her and I can understand why she would have exploded like that. I'm pretty sure she plans to break up with my brother now, and I don't blame her. When I called and asked my brother about this, he admitted it. When I asked why he would think this, he said that he couldn't think of a reason why a man who had been against having kids at the time would willingly adopt a baby without having a blood connection to it. He told Sil that I was Lily's bio dad and was aware of the fact. He took it a step further, and said that me and Lily's mom were together at the time of Lily's conception. Both me and my parents have been in low contact with my brother for a while now. I know I will forgive my brother eventually, but I can't do that right now. He believed I was low enough to have an affair with a married woman, get her pregnant, take no responsibility, allow her to pass off the kid as another man's, and then only take responsibility because her mom died. Relevant comments. OOP on how Lily is handling all of those. Is she mad at her uncle and his fiancé? OOP. She was confused and I had to explain to her what SIL had said in terms she would understand. She was angry SIL would think that of her mom, and I had to explain that she had been lied to and didn't think that anymore. She's not mad at SIL anymore but doesn't want to ever talk to her uncle again. OOP on fatherhood since adopting Lily. OOP, LOL, Yes, I can admit that I'm definitely a lot softer since becoming a father. Adopting my daughter made me have to finally be mature, something I wasn't in my 20s when I adopted her. Commenter, both your brother and Sil are getting off too lightly. He butted into your family and lied to his wife. And sensitive issue or not, she still violated your daughter's privacy, then called her an affair child derisively in front of her. Commenter. When I asked why he would think this, he said that he couldn't think of a reason why a man who had been against having kids at the time would willingly adopt a baby without having a blood connection to it. Your brother is really showing his whole ass here. Your brother was both a terrible sibling and partner. He riled up his fiancée based on her trauma in order to enlist her to help in deceiving you. Awful. OP, I really want to stress this point, take the words right out my mouth. I'm not mad at my Sil because I know she was manipulated into doing this by my brother. I wish more people could understand that. Update 2. September 8, 2024. Update 2. SIL is now XSIL. I don't know if multiple updates are allowed for this sub. If not, take this down and I'll post to my profile. Some people were wondering what happened to my brother and Sil. Well, she dumped him. They tried to make it work, but that only lasted a few days and she ended up giving him the ring back. My brother got shit-faced drunk on my front lawn in the middle of the night. I was pissed because Lily had school the next morning and this woke her up. My brother was yelling insults to both me and my daughter. We called the police and he spent the night in jail for drunken disturbance. I believe the official charge was something like that. I sure as hell pressed charges because he was saying some borderline threatening statements to me and my daughter. I don't think it's enough to qualify for a restraining order, but if it is, I'll get a temporary one. On a more positive note, Lily is doing well. She's getting straight A's in even subjects and is excited about her first ever science project. She's been talking my ear off about it. Send help LOL. Comments. Commenter 1, good for you and your daughter. That was such a violation for you too. Unfortunately, the ex has to deal with her own personal demons. They are both sick. Commenter 2. It's unfortunate that your brother reacted so poorly to the breakup. It's great that you're prioritizing Lily's well-being and ensuring her safety. Hopefully your brother gets the help he needs to deal with his emotions in a healthier way. Dad gave our family business to my lazy brother. He messed up, almost causing a customer to die, and now Dad's begging me to come back and fix it. I, 28F, threw my dad a retirement party somewhat over a month ago. Having maintained our family restaurant for practically his whole life, he was retiring from management. Now, at about 62, he told us he was too exhausted to continue and wanted the company to be passed on to the next generation. Since I had given this restaurant the past 5 years of my life, I very mistakenly assumed he meant me. My family runs 2 other restaurants across the city in addition to an Italian franchise. My uncle runs one, the other is supervised by his daughter. But the most often used branch is ours, and my father is the official owner. For background, my uncle is not really the biological brother of Dad. This all began when my grandfather built his first restaurant, where business first started. Actually, our property is the original one. The restaurant my grandfather opened with my grandmother operated for numerous years until my father assumed control. Then he grew the company by adding 2 other eateries at separate sites. My uncle came in at that point. When we first launched the second restaurant, he left his employment and began working there. His daughter took charge of that place. Since the company has always stayed within the family, when Dad announced his retirement a few weeks before I hosted the celebration, I naturally anticipated him to turn it over to me. Since my uncle wanted to retire in a few years anyway and he is almost the same age as my father, maybe a few years younger, he was not a competitor for the firm. Given my 5-year dedication to the first restaurant, his daughter's 2 years of running the new store represent significantly less experience than I have. I abandoned my corporate job to work with my father ever since I was 23. I wanted to one day inherit the family firm and carry it to unprecedented success. Since I was the strongest applicant to inherit the company, I simply thought it would be me. My cousin was too young and unskilled to manage on her own. My uncle was retiring soon. I knew then it would be me. Though it was somewhat stupid of me not to demand a written agreement, my father never mentioned it straightforwardly. I assumed this was merely understood. Still, at the very last instant my father threw me a curveball. He said on the day of his retirement celebration that my bratty younger brother would be inheriting the company. I have a younger brother and an elder brother. Charles, 34M, my older brother, took the medical route. He is a surgeon and shows no enthusiasm for the restaurant industry. Derek, 26M, my younger brother, spends nothing at all and does nothing all day. Nobody in the family likes him, he is a brat of good value for nothing. Though I have no issue with his lack of talents or his lack of activity all day, I absolutely find his attitude unacceptable. Though he has nothing to show for his life, he behaves as though he is the best and deserves every nice thing that comes his way. Mostly, it's my parents pushing this behavior. Anytime Charles and I try to talk about it, they shut us down and tell us he needs positive support so he could investigate job paths and avoid lifetime freeloading dependent on his parents. A few years ago, he graduated from community college. Since then, he has been let go from at least 5 different companies. He has a major attitude issue, so he can never make things stick. Though I'm not sure why he believes this, he feels he is on the same level as God personally and that nobody else can challenge him. We have to put up with it since we are family, but in the actual world, least of all his employers, none would accept this kind of behavior. It is therefore not surprising that he has been let off from every position within a few months. He is not very talented in anything, and even the jobs he worked at were guaranteed by my father via his contacts. For himself, Derek truly cannot accomplish anything. He is simply a huge screw-up and has no idea about his future direction. Since he was let go from his last job 2 years ago, he has been lounging about our house, draining our parents for the past several years. The worst aspect is his lack of any guilt or regret over it. Our parents ignore him and let him live this way instead of intervening, which makes it quite annoying. It is unfair, particularly because Charles and myself were continuously urging us to improve. Not to seem unappreciative, as Charles and I are doing in our life, but it stinks to see them be so forgiving of Derek. Still, I find him to be a somewhat spoiled brat that absolutely bothers me. As children, we were all wonderful friends. But, since high school, things have changed and I hardly get along with Derek in the least. Everyone was rather surprised when my dad said Derek would be inheriting the company, as he also lacks knowledge of the company or any notion of how things run. A few months before I organized the celebration, my father had announced his retirement. Everyone knew about it. Family members as well as workers. Having been my father's right-hand man, or lady, in my case, I naturally anticipated to take over after he retired. I regret not having a decent discussion about it. I had taken it for granted, and perhaps that was the reason I came undone. I regarded this as evidence that he was intending to leave me in control, even though he had expressed things about what he wanted me to do once he retired a few times. I trusted my father, therefore I never thought of him maybe not leaving the company to me. He had never offered me a justification not to. Though he handled Derek differently, that did not mean he mistreated me. As an employee as well as a daughter, he was always incredibly caring and polite with me. Still, I decided to throw him a party when he announced his retirement. It never occurred to me that he hadn't revealed who his successor would be, since I simply knew it would be me. I was shocked on the day the party was scheduled when he chose to declare Derek would be taking charge. Not only me, everyone at the party, from my mother herself to all the staff, was in shock. Everyone had assumed I would inherit the company, particularly because I had spent 5 years working at the restaurant striving for perfection. Still, after all of my effort, Derek was scheduled to inherit. I found none of it logical. It didn't really dawn on me until my father brought Derek to his side and he smugly declared he embraced his new post. Tears and total devastation drove me literally from the restaurant. 2 minutes later, my father trailed me outdoors. He wants to clarify that he made this very tough choice for specific reasons. Though I was unhappy, I chose to give him some time. Still, his motives were equally illogical and foolish as his choice. He knew it. He informed me that Derek was really useless and that this affected his decision. Derek had been sitting at home for the past 2 years, while my father had been trying very hard to convince him to go out, hunt for a job, and engage in meaningful life activity. Derek took everything lightly. Now my father reasoned that perhaps placing Derek in a position requiring responsibility, such as running the restaurants, would compel him to rise up and improve his output. Derek's heart wasn't in it, according to my father, because he was working for someone else and lacked an interest in his former employment. However, my father thought Derek would have more of a stake and would be driven to be a better worker, since this would be his own business. And if not, at minimum, it would get him out of the home. Then my father informed me that he still wanted me at the restaurant to perform exactly what I used to do for Derek, to be always present for him. He informed me Derek would only be the nominal head. I would be the actual boss. This would, according to my father, inspire Derek to become well. To me, that was quite nasty. Knowing that I was quite capable of doing a far better job than Derek, he expected me to be his shadow and assistant always. I am my own person. I am not the babysitter for my brother. By then, I had worked hard enough to land the job my father had just given Derek. I was still rather offended and not changed even with the justification. I warned my dad he would lose me permanently, or he could undo his words and offer me the job he had just granted Derek. I meant it. I had an ultimatum to offer him. Regretfully, we then engaged in a somewhat nasty argument. He informed me I wasn't thinking about my brother's future and I was being selfish and irrational. By not considering mine, he was also acting selfishly, I told him. We found ourselves fighting in this way. Having nothing to say left, I cut him off after that. He refused to hand the job away from Derek to someone who rightly earned it, me. I made up my mind not to return to the restaurant after I felt so degraded. My last day spent there was the day following the retirement celebration. 1 month after that, I still haven't gone back to the restaurant. Though I don't ask about the business, I have stayed in contact with my mother and Charles. They know how things are going, but they also know it bothers me and I don't want to talk about it. I therefore had no idea how the restaurant was performing until a few days ago. Nothing had truly altered on that front as I stopped talking to my father following that argument and avoided Derek anyhow. After leaving the restaurant, I had also begun submitting applications for other employment. Like any other employee, I did get paid for my work there, and I have some money right now to cover temporary needs. I reasoned I could survive off of my funds till I discovered another activity I wanted to engage in. I had even intended to travel next week, but right now I'm not sure since I might have to return to the restaurant. The cause is, like I had anticipated, my brother messed up quite extensively. For some reason, my dad felt it would be a good idea to let him do anything he wanted, without supervision, to inspire confidence in him. He knew nothing about running a restaurant. Apparently, Derek's emotions came before the family business and other pragmatic issues. Derek had been cutting costs on components in addition to making a lot of careless and foolish financial mistakes from the beginning. Now, it's causing them major difficulties. We offer a separate vegan menu and accommodate vegans so that none of non-vegan items come into touch with vegan meals in the kitchen for ethical reasons. We also set aside space specifically for vegan cuisine cooking. But in his infinite wisdom, Derek closed that compartment to create room in the kitchen and began tampering vegan goods in order to save money. This would only be a matter of time before blowback occurred. 2 days ago, the unavoidable happened. Derek had told staff members to use conventional dairy milk wherever they could avoid using the more unsafe higher-priced soy milk. That moron overlooked the fact that some people are really allergic to dairy, not just vegan for fun. You might fairly predict what followed. A client ordered a milk-based dessert and expressly requested soy milk or another milk substitute to be used rather than ordinary dairy. Usually, one of our regular staff members would have used the alternative as asked and disregarded Derek's ludicrous orders. Regretfully, Derek had chosen a fresh, inexperienced man and given him rigorous instructions to document anyone in the kitchen defying his directions. Derek had discovered that the regular staff members were neglecting him since they were too quickly running out of substitute materials. He recruited this new guy as he wanted someone to spy for him. Sadly, this new employee ignored the customer's request and used conventional dairy milk for the dessert following Derek's directions exactly. He did a really poor job with it as well. Things went south rapidly, and the client experienced a strong allergic response. They now seem ready to sue the eatery. I know all of this since my dad contacted me in the evening a few days ago, the day the incident occurred, to let me know what happened. He looked to be panicking. He told me he had sacked Derek right away since he had no idea what Derek had been doing behind his back. He now asked me to return and rejoin him. He was presenting me with the job I had long sought. It was strange that my brother wanted me to come back now, having screwed up just as I had predicted. From the events of 1 month ago, I was still somewhat wounded and disturbed, hence on the phone I laughed heartily at their predicament. I informed him I never would be returning under any conditions. Just as he had embarrassed me at the retirement party, I said that should he truly want me to come back, I anticipated a public apology in front of the family and all the staff. Before handing me the job, I also wanted him to admit his errors and declare he had sacked Derek. Given what happened during the party, I do not believe I was asking for too much. My father's behaviors were just intolerable, and they had severely wounded me. Since now he was the one depending on me, I thought I was merely asking him to make things right. But my mother felt my requests were a bit excessive. During the phone call, even my father claimed he would not be doing any of it. The company was just as much mine as it was his, he informed me. He stated what I was asking of him was ridiculous and humiliating even though he acknowledged he might have made a mistake. So am I the asshole, AITA, for asking my father to publicly apologize if he wants me to rejoin the family company following the choice of my brother to inherit it over me? Update 1. Hi everyone who took the time to comment on my first post and provide suggestions and encouragement first. Thank you very much for your concern on this matter. It truly means a lot to me. Regarding what I decided to do, I gave it some thought over a few days and concluded I would be returning to the company. Though I had to set aside my pride, the decision wasn't simple as at the end of the day, I have spent 5 years of my life at that place. I want to be the one to drive the company ahead, hence nothing else can change that. Given that my dad won't be around permanently, I truly want to see it flourish rather than be closed down. As I have already said, Charles has no interest in the restaurant, and Derek obviously lacks the skills or ability to run a company of that kind. It thus has to be me. It merely does. My uncle and cousin, who oversee the other 2 branches, agreed I should return when I spoke with them. They think that the restaurant is properly mine, hence if my father is asking me to come back, I should put my past behind me and pursue what I love. To be honest, I would have preferred it if my father had publicly apologized, but I don't want to start a public celebration or gloat over Derek being right. That would not make me very happy as compared to the gratification the success of our restaurant will provide. I now understand I have to choose my battles and have opted to let this one pass for my own benefit. I chatted with Dad this morning. That was a highly civil and official exchange. Though we will talk about them eventually, we decided to temporarily keep our history apart for now. Right now, we provide the situation under current utmost attention. To negotiate and get a settlement, we have set up a meeting with our lawyers and the impacted consumer. Out of court, as she has been continuously tweeting about us on social media. She hasn't acquired much traction thus far, so we have been lucky. Nevertheless, this won't be the case for long, hence we must squish this before it becomes too huge. Update 2. After a lengthy period, yesterday I personally met my father. We met before our customers meeting, and one last time we spoke with our lawyer on everything. Seeing him after so long was odd since, 5 years ago, I had seen him practically daily. Until I actually saw him, I had no idea how much I missed him. Since our lawyer handled much of the conversation, we didn't interact much. We had to concentrate on that, but I could see there was still plenty we needed to talk about. Though later we will have to deal with everything, now was not the proper time. Neither has he brought up anything regarding the event from a month ago, nor has he adequately apologized to me. Still, between us things were friendly and civil, which was a comfort because this was our first in-person meeting following our major argument. Though I expected things to be strange, happily they were not. It had been some time, so my father requested me to come home to see my mum after the conference. Since the retirement party, I have not visited home. I had to turn down though, since I had a prior obligation, that of attending an evening engagement party for a buddy. Fascinatingly, when I questioned my dad whether Derek lived at home, he informed me he did not. I really wanted to know where Derek was living and how it came about, but my dad didn't provide any more information and made it plain he didn't want to talk about it. So I stopped there. Later on I spoke with Charles and he informed me that Derek had moved out a few days following his termination, but he was unsure whether our parents had requested him to leave or whether Derek went on his own. Though things remain unknown, I intend to discuss it with my dad and work out what is happening. The client's meeting turned out better than anticipated. Given the situation, I had thought it would be difficult. What transpired was a major ethical transgression and never would have happened if my father or I had been in charge. The consumer, however, was reasonable. She said that the reason she had threatened to sue and complain so much on social media was that the manager had insisted that she was at fault rather than owning the error. She had, he said, not mentioned her dairy allergy or asked for soy milk. The fact that she was blamed when she knew it was not her fault infuriated her the most. Once we knew the whole truth, we knew how much of a moron Derek had been. The client had refused to interact with us prior to this without her lawyer present. She had stated in her social media posts how the management of the restaurant treated her, but she had not gone into great detail since she feared defamation claims. She hadn't completely explained the matter because Derek had got in touch with her accusing her of lying and threatening to sue her. Until now, my dad and I had not known exactly what transpired. The waiter who ordered her sided with Derek since he feared losing his employment. I don't blame him, even if it means covering for their company. These folks need their jobs and are not ready to jeopardize them. Derek, the new guy he hired, never turned on him, hence he also insisted that the server had not been told about the soy milk, which resulted in the ordinary dairy milk being used. Then Derek and the new guy claimed the customer was trying to obtain money from us and lying to discredit the business. We told the client that Derek, the guy in charge, had been let go. So right now, we were running everything ourselves. Nothing like this will never ever happen again, we assured her. Fortunately, we reached an understanding. She agreed to remove her social media entries and let it go. Although we lost quite a lot of money in the process, at least we were able to tidy Derek's mess. My dad and I can at last relax. Update 3. Hi, I have never been happy. I returned to the restaurant a month ago. To be honest, it took me some time to see how unhappy I had been absent from the workplace. Though I have problems with my father, I love this place. I am going to soar to new heights as I wish. Regarding my father, we are working things out and have come quite far. Having spoken with my parents, we as a family have decided we should spend more time together. A few weeks back, after returning to the restaurant, I had a lengthy conversation with my dad. He and my mother said they handled Charles and me poorly. They wanted to develop Derek to a point where he could compete with us and not feel inadequate. They knew he was the weakest link among us. But they raised his ego to an irrational level in doing this. Now, Derek sees the world of himself without really trying to get better. The day my father dismissed him, Derek moved out and shut everyone off since his pride suffered. Later, my dad discovered Derek is working at a nearby video game store and living with a friend. At least he's trying to make it on his own and acting. It's good for him. Every weekend my family gathers for dinner, including Charles and his wife. Derek has been invited multiple times. It would be disrespectful not to, but he has not responded, as asked. It scarcely counts to me since I have nothing to do with him anymore. Though I would like him in my life, I wish him the best. For me, hanging around with my family has been fantastic. I adore it since my father and I are at last returning to a state of normality. Recently, life has been very wonderful. I have no complaints. At last I am creating something I believe in and doing what I love. I am back on good terms with my family and I do not think I could ask for more. All a person truly needs to be happy is that.